Good. I'd like to call this meeting of West Allis Milwaukee School Board to order. Mr. Becker, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Suzette, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Steele. Here. Mr. Sikich.
Present.
Mr. Keller.
Here.
Mrs. Carr.
Here.
Mr. Becker.
Here.
Mr. Burns.
Present.
Mrs. Lee.
Present.
Mrs. Kaiser.
Here.
President Lee.
Here. Proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Do we have any modifications to the agenda this evening?
Switch it over. Okay, yes, one change, there is not a legislative update this evening, so I'll skip over 6.1 and go to right to 6.2 with the superintendent's report.
Okay, and so with that, we'll move right into the superintendent's report.
Great, good evening, everybody, and thank you. I am in Marquette, Michigan this evening. Extended the stay to support my parents as they're getting older. And it was my turn as one of the siblings, so I appreciate being able to join on Zoom. So the superintendent's report, we'll start with 6.2, the Board of Education recognitions. So from the superintendent's office, a special thanks again to Recreation and Community Services Department for their leadership with the City of West Allis Christmas Parade and the 2022 Annual Children's Target Holiday Shopping Event. Both were great, and as I was out in schools last week, I also saw in principal offices the hats, the coats, the mittens, the additional things that end up in schools as a result of the gift from the Zeman Family Foundation. Then from Recreation and Community Services would like to recognize and thank the Zeman Family Foundation and Target West Allis, Sodexo, School Picks, Sports Picks, Shining Strings, the elementary school staff, all of the staff, student and community volunteers, school board members, the Bryan and Stratton men's basketball team, and of course, Santa and Mrs. Claus for helping to make the annual children's holiday shopping experience a great success. At Hale, I'd like to recognize again Colleen Stepp, Spanish teacher, was recognized by the AATSP Wisconsin chapter as the Distinguished Educator for 2022, and that took place on Saturday, November 5th in Appleton. At Horace Mann, Katie Quinn and Casey Jaroche and their 3rd and 4th grade students have worked with the Street Angels Homeless Outreach. It is a local organization that works very closely with the homeless population in our community. They make holiday cards that go out with the meals during outreach. This year, they have asked for help from the entire school to help give to the Street Angels. Our staff gathered blankets to donate at the start of the year, and to date, the team has created over 300 cards for various holidays and celebrations. So Team Joy, it's one of the classroom teams, is currently working hard to run a sock drive as well as create snack bags for outreach. Over the coming weeks, they will be spreading the word about why socks are so important, as well as gathering donations. And then the music department from Mary Pat Michaels. So 2 more students from Lane Intermediate participated in the UW Milwaukee Middle School Honors Band in November. 6th grader Ilsa Roberts played percussion, and 7th grader Abigail Guinta played flute in the Wisconsin band. They were nominated for this opportunity by their band teacher, Luke Daniels. And we'll go to 6.3, some other updates. So first of all, there were no public comments at a regular board meeting on December 12th, so nothing to update there. Then, as I've been doing school consolidation updates, so tomorrow evening we have our Longfellow community meeting, and I will be back for that. So it's at Longfellow, and that is really to share and get feedback on a number of ideas of how to use the Longfellow property after the school consolidation is complete. So the plan for the meeting tomorrow is to share the ideas that 4 groups of Longfellow students presented, and that was presented to myself, Dr. Stewart, and Steve Eichmann. So 4 different groups of students had ideas about what we could do with the building. We're going to share those with the community group members that gather. Then we're also going to share examples from the reuse of schools in other communities. There's lots of interesting examples. And then we're going to ask participants to join small groups and kind of flesh out some of the ideas that come from either students or from some of examples from other communities. They'll have big blow-ups of the floor plans of the school, and they can draw on those. And then they'll list out advantages and disadvantages of each. And the four big ideas will be exploring a community center. That was one of the student ideas. Housing, which is a very common thing that happens to historic schools. Mixed use. Those are typically a mix between commercial and housing. And then finally, another one of the student ideas, what's an arts and entertainment venue. Then also related to school consolidations, last week, Deidre and I met with the Madison staff, that was on Wednesday, to do a check-in regarding consolidation planning. And these are really, as I said last Monday when we had met with Walker, these are really valuable sessions for us just to keep communication flowing about where we are in the process, and also checking on any rumors. With change, sometimes misinformation moves, and these meetings allow us to really check in on that as well. And then a couple other updates. Just given that our last meeting was only a week ago, there really aren't any other updates of major significance right now. But what I do want to then take this opportunity to wish everyone a safe and happy holiday season. We really want to encourage everyone to celebrate, rest, rejuvenate, so we're ready to come back together again with a continued focus on improving student achievement in the new year. So just wishing everybody a happy holiday season. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 7, our public comments this evening. For those who are in the chat, there should be a link to be able to sign up for public comments. On Zoom in the chat. For anyone who wants to participate, you have 3 minutes to provide your comments to the board. Please start by stating your name and your address. And there will be no back and forth conversation with the board. However, if there is a simple question that can be answered after the public comments, that can be provided at that time, but it will not continue the conversation. So right now, there is one person signed up, and that is Mr. Steve Broadwell.
Steve Broadwell, 12965 West Ohio Court, New Berlin. Marty, despite your dismissiveness of most of my comments these days, you did reply to my Dotke comment by arguing that we should be dancing in the aisles with their improved DPI score of 43 in 2022 from 17 and 21. Both scores still rank as fails to meet DPI expectations. What you failed to point out is how these values are calculated, which paints a different picture. Overall score is comprised of a few categories. Achievement is based on the level of knowledge and skills of students compared to state academic standards. Growth summarizes how rapidly students are gaining knowledge and skills from year to year. On track to graduation indicates how successfully students are achieving milestones that predict post-secondary readiness. Achievement and growth priority areas are adjusted relative to each other based on the percentage of economically disadvantaged students, with year-to-year growth weighted more heavily than actual achievement for those schools or districts with a higher percentage like Dotke. Being a newer school, until the 2021 school year, Dotke had no growth score. So the very low score of 17 was calculated using only achievement at 80% and 20% on track to graduate. Dotke's score is now calculated using only 8% for achievement, 72 for growth, and 20 for on track, with economic advantage already baked into the formula. In a nutshell, the big jump you cited last year was mostly due to a big change in the formula used to calculate their score. Without that change, score would have likely still been under 20, as achievement and on track were still very poor. Even with the change, this initial growth score contribution was better than only 11.2% of state district school growth scores. Now, I don't know if you did not understand all this, or if you did and intentionally chose to spin numbers to the public to make a school look good that still scores as fails to meet expectations after 4 years under your leadership. Whether intentional or not, your comment was very misleading. For the district as a whole, when you started here in 2015, the district had a 65 overall that met expectations. Now we score 54.9 that meets few expectations. Achievement and growth are each better than only 5.8% of state schools, and on track to graduate better than only 2.9% of state schools. You can't blame COVID. Area schools that made better decisions on how to handle COVID weathered the storm much better than this district, with some even improving. This board, led by Noah, has shown poor judgment in not only allowing you to continue in your role, but with many other decisions and actions that prevent this district from flourishing.
Okay. There's no one else signed up currently for public comment, so I'll wait for a few seconds in case someone joined the Zoom link late and would like to sign up. There is a link in the chat for anyone who would like to address the board. All right, seeing no additional comments, commenters signed up, we will close public comments at this time and move on to board reports, starting with 8.1, going through the board calendar. So tonight is Monday, December 19th, and we have a regular Board of Education meeting, immediately followed by a financial stability and efficiency workshop meeting where we're going to talk about other post-employment benefits. Then we have winter break, and I'd like to also wish everyone a happy and healthy winter break, spending time with family and friends, enjoying that time off. And then we will return after the new year on Monday, January 9th at 6 p.m. With a regular Board of Education meeting, followed by a financial stability and efficiency workshop, enrollment projections and open enrollment seats for the 23-24 school year. Then on Monday, January 16th at 6 p.m., we have a board workshop. We'll be meeting with Melissa Matarazzo from Huron Consulting Group, where we talk about the strategic plan as well as a scorecard update. And then on Monday, January 23rd at 6 p.m., we have regular Board of Education meeting with immediately followed by a closed session. So we have no board committee reports since we just had those last week, and we have a different calendar for December because of the holidays. So move on to 8.2, board member reports of community events. If anyone have any events that they attended, they would like to report on. Mr. Sikich.
I would like to give a shout out and a very strong thank you to Wilson School staff and students. They invited me in to read Christmas stories, and I was there for 4.5 hours today, but it was worth it. I got my super reader badge.
Those are hard to come by.
But anyway, thank them for inviting me. So, Brian.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Sikich. Anyone else? Ms. Thiel.
So last week, Wednesday, I think. So I went to Irving Elementary, had their author night. It was really cool. So they actually had a Julie Hardgrove, who actually wrote a children's book. So she talked about her process. And then there's actually a student at Irving, Caleb Brown, who wrote his own book. It's called Kung Fu Caleb. It is available on Amazon, Kung Fu Caleb. So it was really great. He talked about how he came up with the idea of publishing his book. It was really great. They had hot cocoa and cookies for the family. They had Santa there, but then they had like the students all their writing up on the walls with like lights and stuff. So you took like a little like tour of the hallways. So it was really great.
All right. Thank you very much. Anyone else attend anything they would like to report on? Okay, well, I'll say a few things, I guess. Number one, I was also I was able to attend the author event. I must have came after you left. And it was great. Like the school looked fantastic. It was very like nicely decorated. Santa was there, and I was able to talk with Caleb about his process because I missed the presentation portion. We had an agenda meeting that night, so I was late. And but yeah, it was great to see all the different students writing up on the walls. You could see that as you toured through the school, and have a published author along with our student who is technically also a published author now, and spoke with his mom and how he came up with the idea and how much he liked Kung Fu, and he loved kicking, and also the advice he gave me was to protect your jaw. So that was the thing I took away from that, from the Kung Fu, the book that he wrote. So that was fantastic. I also was able to attend the all choir concert at West Milwaukee last week, which was, I thought phenomenal. It was, not Christmas music. It was a winter concert. And so we had music from across many different genres from different parts of the world. And I thought it was really great to see the different groups kind of perform individually. And then they all came together and sang one song at the end. So that was fantastic. And then also have to shout out the Wilson staff who invited me to come by for their event they had last week, Friday. Santa did make an appearance, and so the kids seemed really happy about that. And once again, a fantastic event put on by the staff and the PTA there, which is an annual thing they've been doing for some time there since when my kids used to go there. So just those are the things I was able to participate in, and it was really great. Anything else before I close the community events? No? All right. So the last is 8.3 other updates, information items, which I actually don't have anything. So we won't get another update from for the superintendent search until after the new year. And so once our first meeting on January 9th, I'm looking to have another update about how many applications we have completed, because that'll be 1 week before that actually closes. And then we'll move into the next step. Part of that process would be first round interviews after working with Rain Associates on the questions and whatnot that we're going to have to work with for kind of moving forward. Okay, so moving on to our consent agenda this evening, we have 9.1, the approval of the minutes of our meeting from last week, December 12th. We have the employment 9.2, our employment summary, 9.3, supplementary contracts, and 9.4, our financial summary. Does anyone need anything separated out? If not, I would look for a motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute questions or discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? All right, that passes. And we'll move right into our action item for this evening, 10.1, district office relocation. Dr. Lexman, Mr. Norris, and Mr. Eichmann. I
Yeah.
don't know if Dr. Lexman has any preamble. Dr. Lexman?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll do a brief introduction to this and as we move into the workshop following this. So what the team has done in a week was pretty impressive in terms of trying to respond to the various questions that the board surfaced last week, Monday. And so the team will take us through essentially the same presentation with additional information in it. And so the team will go through the slides that are the same pretty quickly and really focused on the additional information about what would district offices be like at a Longfellow, like at a Central, like at a Madison, and then also take us through a little bit why we think those three particular options that were considered were then discarded as viable options. And then kind of leading into an alternate recommendation based on the conversation from last week with the board about returning to 9333, but in a way that really aligns to the exact kind of purchase, or sorry, the sale of 1205 and 1135. Because that was what was designated by the board in the past for future administrative offices. And it also gives us some flexibility as things may change going forward. So that's kind of where the team will take us, and we're hoping to get some direction from the board tonight to continue, hopefully with the alternate recommendation, or if there's a different direction the board would like us to go. But again, what we talked about last week, the clock is ticking in terms of the lease, and getting some direction from the board allows us to take more concrete action responding to some of that timing and to getting moving towards construction, because as we know, all of that takes quite a bit of lead time these days. So with that, I'll turn it over to the team.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Lexman, for that intro and kind of the background leading us up back today, kind of an extension from last Monday. So I want to just thank the board and the team for the collaboration on Monday. I feel like discussion and kind of different opinions, optics, things like that, how you come to the best I guess decisions. So I feel like that really helped expand our discussions as a team. So I just want to thank the group here for that last Monday. I thought it was really helpful for us and Steve and our partners, Bray and CG Schmidt, in coming to dive a little deeper into some of this information that Steve will share tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve to jump into kind of a similar but modified presentation for this evening.
Okay, thank you. And like Dr. Lexman said, and Aaron as well, is I'll go through some of these slides a little quicker because they're essentially unchanged from last week, but there are some where there is more information. So the agenda for the most part has not changed. Then we have the rationale for the relocation again, just that the current lease expires on March 31st of 2024. If we are going to extend it by whether it's, for the 2 months or the 2 years that it's in the contract or on month to month, we do have to let them know. And I know that Aaron has been working with them on what that might look like if we were to go month to month. The other thing that I want to point out as well is, we've talked about the consolidation and we have the meeting about Longfellow tomorrow. Part of what we're looking at as well is right sizing the district office. And currently on the 5th and 6th floor here, we have over 24,000 square feet. And with the proposed space that we're looking at 9333, if we were to do an addition, it's a 2,600 square foot addition. Or if we were just to remodel and renovate the unused portion of 9333, it's about 9,515 square feet. So it will be considerably less space than what we have here. And then, we want to avoid ongoing lease payments is why we're looking at it and wanting to, as Dr. Lexman said, move forward. The partners are the same and what each of them brings to the table has not changed. The district office needs, that's unchanged. The only thing I put at the bottom of this is added that we're looking for a permanent or forever home for the district office, not someplace to go for 2 or 3 years and then have to make another jump. The Brace Space Program and what we're looking at in different sizes for offices and that has not changed from last week. And there's options considered and investigated. So option 1, again, is looking at the addition above the existing multi-story building, and that remains unchanged. Option 2A is where we're at a small addition above the existing single-story building, and that would be that 2,600 square foot addition. And then we added option 2B, which is, you can see only a little bit of red on the bottom left. We would redo an opening there and possibly have that be the ADA compliant entrance as well. But there would be no addition. We would just be looking at renovating the square footage that's unused now at the front part of 9333 West Lincoln. And then option 3A, B, and C, that is unchanged from last week as well. That's moving the wellness center to either Lane and have it be part of the non-rec area, have it be a standalone building, or possibly have it at Longfellow. Then there's 3 options that we did add, and that's Madison Elementary. Look at the district office going to Madison Elementary, to Central High School, or to Longfellow Elementary. And you can see with each of these, we're looking at remodeling approximately 12,000 square feet. And the reason we're looking at 12,000 square feet here as opposed to the 9,600 is the 9,600 and just renovating that front part, that does not include the addition where leadership and learning would go. So when we looked at the options for these 3 buildings, we looked at including everybody. So that's why it's the 12,000 square feet.
Getting back to Steve's earlier priority of creating a space that would be the space at for like forever, not to renovate, right? That was kind of the thinking.
So then I had the estimated costs and timeline for each one. So option 1 was 10,700,000, and you can see we have it broken down by the addition, the remodeling, the site work, and the CIP work. And then option 2 is the addition above the existing single-story building, and that's 7.8 million. And you can see that's broken down again by the addition, the remodeling, the site, and the CIP. Then we have the relocation of the wellness center and what the 3 options would cost there, and then the estimated move-in date. And then for the new options that we added from last week, you can see that option 4, which is renovating, and again, all 3 of these are approximately 12,000 square feet, would be between 6.4 million and 7.8 million at Madison Elementary School. And that would include remodeling, site work, and then CIP work with an estimated move-in date of March 1st. Option 5 of Renovating approximately 12,000 square feet at Central would be 5.5 million to 6.7 million. And at Longfellow would be approximately 7.1 million to 8.7 million.
And again, some of the CIP parameters are gonna be a little unknown, as we kind of talked that through before last Monday, but generally we tried to use similar percentage bases. So the CIP that Steve presented, as you saw last meeting for 9333 was around 2.2 million of total CIP, and then he broke that down between, oh, sorry, kind of scared me there. Broke that down between, you know, what needed to be done and what was kind of could be pushed aside. So 1.4 to 2.2, so around like 55% of the CIP was required. So when you look at Madison, you know, a 2.4 to 3, the total CIP needs that were identified in the facility master plan were 6.5 million. So we're trying to, you know, as a baseline with a week, trying to get you some realistic numbers that are really, we think, reasonable, conservatively reasonable. So that's where some of those numbers come from if you have questions about that.
And like I said, we did break it down by the remodeling, the site work and the CIP, so you could see all what goes into those numbers. So again, we looked at option one. We talked about last time that the addition will require an elevator and egress stairs, would include additional space not needed, and then structurally would have to do some work on inside and add additional beams. And then option 3A and B, no addition would be required. It would also include additional space not needed. And then the wellness center would have to move off site, either to, like we said, Longfellow or Lane. And then the options investigated and discarded. Option 3 detail. This is just the detail that we went through last time for the two options at, or the three options of with Lane, and then also two options, I guess, at Lane, and then the one at Longfellow with the relocation of the wellness center. And then here, option 4 is if the district office would move to Madison Elementary School. It would occupy only a small portion of the building. Be operating and maintenance expenses would be required for the entire building. As we talked about last week, it's not on a bus line. And then also the final disposition is not determined. So if Madison is repurposed after the district office went there, the district office subsequently would need to relocate, which would be an additional expense on top of what we paid or spent to remodel Madison. And option 5, which is Central High School, the leadership and learning classroom couldn't be included in that, so they would not be able to move there. And then the board has discussed possible consolidation of Central and Hale down the road. So again, if that were to happen, then the district office would have to relocate again. And then the enrollment center may not be easily accessed by the public. And so depending on where it ended up, parking may be an issue, and also security could be an issue as well if the public was required to walk through the building to actually get to the enrollment center.
In one of the things Steve and I talked about too, an added element that we hadn't thought about, or we had thought about, but hadn't really got into that here, is hypothetically, if we were to renovate and move into Madison, right? Part of the plan around consolidation and like the facility master plan is to maximize district owned space. So if 9333, the portion that's undeveloped and not renovated, if we moved into Madison, we still have the question of, well, what's the plan for 9333 then? It's unused space. It's not renovated. It's vacant at this point. If we moved into Madison and it was the board's decision that that was going to be the district office, then Madison would be the district office. Maybe there'd be extra space to do other things, but you'd still have the question of 9333. Well, if the opposite is true and the 9333 building gets used, Madison's already constructed for a school. So options to have that become academic again, you know, pending the grades and things like that, should be viable options, if that makes sense. That was kind of something we talked about too in our meeting. So.
And then option 6 would be if we were to go to Longfellow. And as we talked about last week, this site is the one that's most conducive to development. Again, we'd only be using a small portion of the building. There's no elevator, so a majority of the building would be inaccessible to individuals that were non-ambulatory. And then again, the final disposition hasn't been determined. So if the district office were to move there, a few years down the road, we could have to be looking at having to relocate the district office again. And then these are the CIP priorities that we went through for 9333. That has not changed from last week. And then this was option 2A, where it showed the leadership and learning in the red and the pink there on the upper right. And then the gray at the bottom, again, is the wellness center. And then the dark turquoise and the light turquoise would be the area that would be renovated. And we went through that it was 7.8 million was the estimated cost. And again, that included 2.1 million of CIP items. And we talked about there could be 606,000 of that 2.1 that could be deferred that would bring the cost down to approximately 7.2 million then. And then option 2B, which would be if we did no addition, but we remodeled the existing unused portion of the upper level of 9333, the wellness center would remain on site. And they would not have to relocate during renovation or remodeling either. You can see the remodeling is approximately 2.5 million, site work is 1.3, and the CIP is 2.1. But again, of that 2.1, if it was at the board's desire, we could reduce that by about 600,000. And we also would have a March 1st move-in date, and our deadline to be out of here is March 30th of 24. So it would work that way as well.
So total cost there, 5.3 to 5.9, depending on if the CIP wanted to be completely done or a tiered back plan, just to give you kind of. Yeah. Jeff.
If we look at option 2B, and the wellness center is staying and we're not doing any additions, is there enough space for the offices that we need to be there?
Leadership and learning would not have a space there at this point. We could look at, maybe doing some rearranging and repurposing of what's downstairs. But I don't know if there's 5 offices. There isn't 5 offices and a conference room and all of that downstairs.
It's downstairs where the old copy was, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Down there, yes. Between where the maintenance area is and where the print shop is.
Gotcha.
To me, the discussion really between A and B, beyond the cost, obviously, is really if it's up, the board's thoughts around, is it the intention of the board to keep the wellness center where it is? Or do we think at a future date, it makes sense to consider having that be at the Lane site currently? Because if that is something that you think long-term makes the most sense, then 2B might be where you live a little bit, because then when that decision gets made for it to move, you could renovate very minimally the current wellness center into being office space. It's already designed to be office spaces. I think when we talked with CG Schmidt and Bray, they thought it'd be significantly very, very cheap to do something like that. So much so that they didn't think the numbers would change very much because it's renovated. There's electrical, there's drywall up, it's clean. We're using the space currently. So to me, that's the decision sticking point there.
There's usually, when they're looking at renovation or remodeling, they have 3, types, and it's low, medium, and high renovation. And the wellness center as it is now would be low for all the reasons that Aaron stated.
Yeah.
You talked about the locating the wellness center and keeping it there. I would be one for keeping it right there because it's centrally located for our staff. You put it at Lane, East End teachers have a hard time getting there and back if they're getting coverage for their classes, and likewise if it's at Longfellow. So to me, it seems to make sense to leave it where it is.
And then the funding of and we're calling option B, if you saw the title there, the alternate recommendation. And that came about, like we said, as through the discussion that we had last week. And so Fund 49, the current balance is approximately 7.9 million, and 606.67 million of that came from the sale of this building and the one next door. The alternate option 2B, the estimated cost is 5.9. And again, we talked about if we were to do the full 2-year lease extension, that's about almost 700,000 over the course of that 2 years. And if we were to do month to month, it could approximately In talking with real estate agents, they said it's difficult to, pick a building and say how much they think month to month might be. But they thought that 20% higher than what we're currently paying is reasonable. So that would mean the difference then between about 28,500 a month or 34,200 a month for however long we were to stay here. If we did something where we couldn't move into, wherever we relocate, by March 30th.
Good question, Noah, sorry. Missed you there.
That's right. It was regarding the wellness center. I was having a conversation with a community member this weekend, and they brought up something, and I don't know when the wellness center was first put together, if this was considered. About contracting out that to, instead of, I know we contract with somebody, but instead of having a space that's dedicated within the district for it, to have it contracted for a company that has space in different parts of the area. So then it becomes more convenient for staff if they're not going during the school day per se, but going after school, before school. They can hit it on the way into work or on the way home from work, sort of thing, versus having space that we're dedicating for it.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think about, because of the wellness center and the space it takes up, was that and you may not know the answer to the question, since this is a new question for myself. If that was considered, or if there is something about the wellness center that would make that better than doing that.
No, it's a good question. Marty actually had talked to Steve and I about that a few weeks ago, and similar to kind of Jeff's point earlier, we did reach out to kind of our health insurance broker. They have a connection to some commercial real estate, working with Freighter. That's our new vendor coming up in April. And so they're currently looking into what space would be available for lease to get us an idea of pricing. But the challenge is going to be trying to find something that's centrally located for staff. If it's in Greenfield, that's great. We can lease it, but is that something that we think is a good plan for staff to use if we're trying to utilization? So there are some challenges. We're currently working on some to see if that's an option, if there's something available. And then there's also is it designed for what we need it for? Would there be renovation costs? Would we do that? There's some of those variables there, but something to consider, I think. No.
So I wasn't talking about leasing space and housing it elsewhere, but like
Contract.
contract, like Quad Med, for instance, have places all over the place, and companies will contract with Quad Med to say our employees can go there too.
Oh,
And so Quad Med owns the space, they maintain the space, but you're basically paying, we're already contracting with someone, right? We're already paying someone money. We're just providing the space.
Yeah.
So the question would be would it be better if we did that with with Freighter has the fast care clinics, right? At Miners, right? That's something they're going to have access to. I think that will expand usage because they're at more places than just one spot,
right.
which may be far away from where staff might want to be, unless they're like in the middle of a school day and then they're going to go do it.
Right.
So that's a question I had, because then if we did it that way, if it was cost effective, again, I have no idea about cost or anything like that, but then we don't have to worry about the wellness center space. And we could renovate it so to have leadership and learning having a spot in that same venue. So I know this is not something that we're going to be able to figure out tonight, but something that I would like to consider as we move forward with this project, whatever the board ends up deciding for the admin buildings that might, as you mentioned, long-term, where do we want to have a wellness center? Well, maybe we don't technically have a wellness center, but we contract with wellness centers across the area that people can attend. And hopefully one would be centrally located so people could go during the school day still if they wanted to.
Gotcha. Okay. We can look into that. Oh, Jeff.
If I recall, when we did that, we looked into some of those options, but at the time, you have to remember that space was not being utilized by us. There was nothing there. So it was cheaper for us to build the wellness center there than to pay somebody to house it for us. And with WEA giving us the kickback, we weren't losing money on it at all. So,
right. Which is similar to our new contract with United Healthcare too. Just
yeah.
Well, and that's the thing with with the alternative recommendation is that we could get the district office relocated from here to 9333 in the time frame that we need to. And while we're still looking at the possibility of the wellness center going somewhere else, and then we could do some minor renovation to what is the wellness center now. And it could be a win-win for everybody then. And then next steps were to seek board approval of the alternate recommendation. And then talk about if we want to pursue an expedited bid process. And then Aaron has been working on a month-to-month extension And if we need to, develop a plan to temporarily relocate the district offices and then identify possible options for vendor selection, board approval of vendors, and provide notice to proceed if necessary. And that's the presentation.
Jane.
Have you given any thought to when leadership and learning would be added? So they'll be displaced for a while. Are we talking a school year? Where will they be? And do you have any idea of when you might come before the board and ask them to add that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think if the plan is for the wellness center at a later date, pending board approval to be moved to the Lane site, I think a lot of that, as we've talked through the Lane project, has been tied to future levies, right? And the board's commitment not to raise taxes beyond the levy. So if the levy comes in and state funding, the legislature, everything works out where that levy can be increased to where Shelley needs it to finish that project sooner, then I think that discussion could happen quicker. But realistically, I mean, probably 2 years, probably minimum, probably 3 conservatively.
And where would they go?
And where would they go?
Well, that would be up to the board to decide whether that'd be part of Shelley's plan to build that onto the current site, or if that would be a standalone. But you mean leadership and learning, sorry.
Yes,
Yeah, I
where would
think,
leadership and learning go for.
yeah,
that
I think
amount of
in
time?
conversation with Deidre, that would be in a school. There's space in school, Central or Madison, for the time being.
And the leadership and learning classroom is in the alternative option, so that still would be at 9333. It's just that they're what's we call the Sky Lounge now, that and the 5 offices would not be there.
And then I have a question about the bid process. So why do we need to pursue the bidding process? I'm thinking about, that would mean that we would be paying more rent here. I mean, why are we doing it? What's our reasoning for doing that?
I can answer that, and it's a great question.
Okay.
Is we don't need to. And the reason I say that, in my opinion, we don't need to is when I originally wrote the RFPs for the long range facilities master plan for the architect and the construction management companies, I put a clause in there, and if I can, I'll read it was in both of those. It's in the section where it's talking about awarding the contract. It says the district retains the right to negotiate with a consultant to provide engineering and/or architectural services for any future construction, remodeling, renovation, etc. projects related to the long-range facility master plan. And in the scope of both the construction management RFP and the architectural RFP, the last line item was the relocation of the district office. And, and because I've done this in other contracts, because, it's one of those, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I mean, if you have a company or companies that work well together, they work well with us, they meet our needs, you have the ability to be able to use them. If they're not meeting our needs, that gives us an out to say, hey, you were great for this, but going forward, you're not going to meet our needs. And the other is the price that the construction management company put in there for, I don't know if you remember, but it was based on the dollar amount of any, projects that we would do. And it's like, and I don't know what it is exactly, but if say it might be 5 million to 10 million, 10 million to 25 million, and then they give a percentage for each of those. Well, for this size project, it would be 1.95%. And I talked with Mark Lillesand, who was here last week, and he said they will honor that, even though that was a rate that they quoted 3 years ago and pre-pandemic.
So just to kind of like restate that, if we go to bid, it's likely this same company will have an increase in that price. It was a pre-COVID commitment in price. They've honored it because they kind of have to. So your guesses could be as good as mine, but construction post-COVID, my first guess is going to be 10% plus the cost of the month-to-month lease.
Yeah, depending on what you're doing right now, it's anywhere from 8 to 12%.
Yeah. So on a project scope of 6 million, if it's 10%, that's 600,000 plus the monthly lease.
And I'm comfortable with your recommendation, except for that piece. I think that we should not go to bid. I think that we should move forward. And I don't know if we do an amendment to that or
You
or
mean to the
whatever, but I
recommendation?
would like to suggest that we take that piece out of when we vote tonight. We would, if we were,
Well, the,
what is the,
well, the recommendation would be for the alternate, which would just be for the renovation of the unused portion of 9333 and then that, new little entranceway.
yeah,
What is in here is if, if we need to pursue an expedited bid process, if we don't decide to, to go with what was written into the RFPs,
oh, okay.
I just wanted to put that in there. I didn't want to
Okay, so we would.
just feel like I was,
I'm sorry.
leading you down a path one
Okay.
way or another.
Okay,
But I just wanted to let you know that I did write that into the both RFPs.
okay,
And like I said, I did verify with Mark Lillesand, who is the executive vice president, that yes, they will honor that 1.95%.
okay. Then I'm comfortable.
Yes.
I'm all for that option 2A. We had money set aside to do a project. Let's do it right. Why move into 9333? Not have leadership and learning. They're not really sure where they're going. They're not with their cohorts. It just doesn't seem to make any sense not to do that right away.
Ms. Kaiser.
I'm backing up Mr. Stickich on this. If, when we sold this building and it being earmarked for a new forever home for us, if we're gonna have a forever home and we go with 2B and we feel like we're missing so much and then have to go back after the fact and put in more money into a project that here we have it laid out for us being honored by our thing. I can't imagine saying, leadership and learning and saying, here's a piece of it, and we're not gonna include in this, although it's one of the biggest pieces of being a school district.
Mhm.
So I hope others feel the same way as I do, but I only support 2A.
And again, if I may, if we were to go with 2A, the renovation of the unused portion would still be done by March 1st.
Yep.
The addition would probably be May 1st, but we have talked with Mrs. Reamer, and she said that, they would be able to, find a place to relocate for those few months where they wouldn't be able to be there, and they would be out of here.
Right. So last week I was one of the ones that had a few questions and raised a few concerns. And I think part of that was just kind of showing that we're doing our due diligence again. Completely trust and appreciate your recommendation, but I think with everything that is going on, it's just good to show that, hey, we looked at these options. This is what we intended to do. This is the reasons why we're planning on doing it. And I think now that we've had a little bit more information in terms of what some of those options were and talked through a little bit about the justification of why 2A and 2B would be the two choices we'd want to look at. I think it makes sense. I think we did the homework. I think we know what the purpose is. Again, we want to make sure we have 9333 sitting right there. It's half vacant. Let's utilize it for what we need it for. There's not enough here from a cost perspective to really swing it another way, especially if those would potentially be more temporary fixes. So I think, I think with this additional information, it makes sense. And I would say that it probably makes sense because I'm also in the same boat as Mr. Sikich. I don't think that I'm in favor of the health center staying where it is. I think it's a good location. I think it's centrally located. And if that's the case, then I think it makes sense to go with 2A right away.
Other comments or questions?
The only reason that we weren't going to go with the addition was because of money, correct? We said that it did not, the sale of this building gave us less money than it would take to add that addition, correct? So it's a money issue. So where would the other money come from? And because that was the only reason somebody brought that up last time, correct? That was the reason we said, let's get it closer to spending the amount of money that came from the sale of this building.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that was part of the discussion on last Monday around, it'd be cleaner, I think, and easier to explain if the sale and the building and the renovation total costs were kind of similar in cost and close, but not even with the decrease 7.8, reducing CIP 600,000 gets you to 7.2. You're still off by 700,000. Currently we have just under 8.5 million and 49. That's kind of a typo on our end there. But you know, those dollars earn interest. And so 6.5 million, I'd have to look deeper into kind of where that number's gotten to, but we currently have $8.4 million and 49. So we have enough to cover the entire renovation in whole from, you know, regardless if you wanted to do the whole 7.8 or 7.2 or a tiered down approach. I think, Steve, we talked about being able to pull back on the, what was it, the ADA accommodations on the west or the
Yeah.
west side of that building to make that cheaper too. So there's some flexibility there as
Yeah.
well, I think. So,
There's probably another 100,000 or so maybe we could shave off as well.
yeah.
But still make the building ADA compliant.
Mhm. So, you know, it seems likely we might be able to get that closer to 7 if there's other things we wanted to remove from that plan. So.
Yeah.
Work with
And I,
CJ.
and I think from the sale, there's 6,670,000 and some change.
But in some, in 49, I have it up right now. Just. We have $8,431,681.
Mr. Burns.
I was one of the other ones that was grumbling last week. And I think too, looking at these, the thing that stands out to me, and I think that maybe we didn't hit on as much, is that looking at this, we did have the money earmarked for a new space, and we had what, 6.7, you said?
Yeah.
Right, so we have 6.7 million for that, and realistically, both of these options come in for that space under that. It's the CIP that we're running into, and even if we have the scaled down component, we still have the 2.1 million in CIP, so there's no difference. So if we weren't even moving these over there, we'd still have 2.1 million in CIP. And I think that the issue that I've been struggling with is that 2.1 million of that CIP, using it there versus in the schools. And that's still that piece. That said, what we're putting together, what you guys put together with the designs that actually do come in under for the space itself, that's for the facilities or right sizing them, it's under the cost of what we sold for. So I mean, I don't think that there's a better option than 2A at this point, because I think if we're going to have something right, we have it right. It's our long range plan, because if we're doing it, well, here, we'll do this, we'll do that, then it's not really a long range plan. It's our plan for now. And I think we need to do our long range plan. So if this is what puts us on the map for having it done and it's moving on with, that's where I'm at. And then I hope that we're looking at things like this with the CIP to really get the schools taken care of the way we want them to as we move forward with other pieces. So.
Oh, and I just wanted to thank you. I don't call it grumbling. I think it was good. I think it was, no, in all honesty, I think it was great discussion. I mean, and that's why, in my opinion, that's why we have the workshops.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, we all look at it from our perspective, and you guys have a broader perspective. You know, you're out in the community all the time. I mean, you hear what everybody's saying. So I do appreciate when you bring those things up. And, you know, and like I said, we tried to capture, you know, what was discussed last week so that now it's in writing so that everybody can see these are all the options. And I think in the executive summary, when we went through all of these, like 3A and B and that, there were actually 10 different options that we looked at. And so I think, you know, we can feel, or at least I can feel comfortable that we looked at all the options that we feel make sense, both from a efficiency standpoint, but also economically as well.
Other questions or comments? Becca? Joe,
Can I make a motion?
you good?
No, just that I appreciate the extra work. I think the expanded view is really helpful. It is, it makes us feel more comfortable about the investment.
So,
I said, can I make a motion?
well, can I say something?
Go ahead.
So, you always feel a little bad because, the recommendation that you originally made, and then you did a bunch of extra work, and now we're gonna come back to the recommendation you originally made. But the point is just that, we're thinking about all possibilities and making sure that the dollars that are spent are going to be the best used.
Yep.
And whenever we, in the time I've been on the board, have approved a project, I've never regretted it afterwards. The dollars have always been well spent. Never over budget. And so that's the thing that is super important, especially in this day and age with lead times and everything like that. And so CG Smith has been a good partner with the district in that regard. And frankly, gets the business from the district time and again because of that and the working relationship that we have with them. So the bid process, which was a question, which we know legally we were fine not to do. But want for the purpose of transparency, want to make sure like, okay, is this something that we want to continue? Because we don't have to, right? It's written in there that we do not have, we're not married to CG Schmidt if we do not want to be. So I think that, we're comfortable with that perspective of not going to bid and awarding the contract based off of that. I would be proponent of not delaying CIP. And the main reason for that is because it's just going to cost more later to do the same amount of work. I think in the part of going through the construction process, it's easier when things are open or whatever to do what those CIP needs are at that point in time versus coming back later to do it. When we want to spend that extra 600,000. If we have the money in the account from the sale of this building interest, and I think the sale of Roosevelt is probably in there as well. Then I think it's a good use of that to get everyone set and done. And then the question about the admin building, what's going to happen to it, where it's going to be, is answered for the foreseeable future. I don't know why or if it would ever have to change, but certainly not my tenure on the board. The other thing is we didn't talk about, but the boardroom obviously is not included in this plan. And our plan for the boardroom is possibly at the rec center, current location rec center, possibly also at the future new location of the West Side Rec Center, possibly in schools. That is a little bit up in the air at this point, but we do know it won't be at that facility and it won't be here. We'll be moving out of here with everyone else to other locations, but I just want to make that clear for the public. So not wondering what's happening. It doesn't really matter as long as it's accessible to the public and we have the technology to be able to do the recording and the broadcasting. We can go literally anywhere in the district, and we'll probably make use of that as a board moving forward. And other districts do the same. They have it in either different buildings or in just one building, whatever. It has to be accessible. That's really the main focal point. So I think that from conversation that we're pretty much in consensus on 2A at this point, which is different from your recommendation, which was 2B. So the motion we would need would be that we would want to move forward with option 2A if everyone approves with not delaying the CIP cost. So it would be at the estimated cost of 7.8 million at this point, unless there's any further discussion about the CIP.
No, I mean, she could include that. in
Yeah.
the-
Yeah, exactly.
motion.
As long as everyone's okay with it. I don't want someone to be like, no, I don't think we should do it, and then have to vote no, and then we have to have our discussion. Now's the time to have that discussion. If we're okay with including the full cost of CIP, then we can move forward with that motion.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Kaiser, you want to make that motion?
Sure, I moved to move forward with option 2A, which includes CIP,
Full CIP, yeah.
full CIP
It's 7.8 million.
at 7.8 million, sorry.
For district office relocation.
For district office relocation. I'm so bad at this, guys.
If somebody just reads it, they won't
I
know
know.
what that is.
That we recommend option 2A for moving the district offices to 9333, which includes full CIP costs at a estimated total of 7.8 million.
Second.
Second. All right. Any last minute discussion? Right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. passes. Thank you very much for all the work. that
Thanks,
you
Mr.
did.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Guys, appreciate it.
And please extend that also to Cindy Schmidt and their team as well.
Okay.
All right, so That was the only action item for this evening. So we have our workshop, financial stability and efficiency. Do we need a break before that, or can we roll right into that?
Let's go.
Oh, Marty, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Oh, yeah. he's not here.
I have Marty.
Oh, he does. He does.
Oh.
1 second.
I move that I never make motions again.
Marty, you had something you wanted to say?
My campaign.
Yeah, you ready? All right, am I on? Great. Thank you for the last action on the motion. I think you landed in the right place, even though it was a bit of a journey. I really appreciate it. And I think Steve Eichmann summarized the kind of reflection well, is that you went through the kind of process a good board should go through. You did your due diligence, you asked questions, you pushed us. And I think we ended up in a really good place that is something we can get done on time and within budget. So really good work there. So now I'll do a little bit of introduction to the next big piece, which is a part that, like the facility master plan, dealing with the high cost for us of retiree healthcare is all part of our strategic plan, right? So these are all things that we've been aiming at for years. There are conversations about retiree healthcare. We've surfaced a number of times over the years, and with COVID, it went to the back burner for a while. And Caitlin was working on it, and Aaron really picked it up and started to move the pieces forward. And what we'll talk through tonight is really what most districts in the state have done, which is moving from a defined benefit, which means we promise retirees X number of years of paid healthcare. So that's the defined benefit, and changing it to a defined contribution where you leverage the investment of dollars over time to build a health reimbursement arrangement, or HRA, for employees when they retire. So it's a different way to present what is an effort to have a comparable benefit with a different kind of investment on the part of the district resources. It is a change that comes with some anxiety. Any big changes in organizations do. And so after tonight, we do have a draft communication that we'll probably touch again based on some of the conversation and the questions board members may have. And we'll get that out to all employees on Wednesday, just so we don't delay information and rumors start kind of get moving in the gap. So we're ready to go with that, but we wanted to take the next step. This has been worked through a number of times with directors, with committee, and now it's the conversation with the full board. And then Aaron will also talk about, the communication Wednesday is just the very beginning baby step of how to roll this out and get additional feedback before we come back to the board and ask for consideration and action, right? So today is not that point. There's many steps before we're going to come back and say, okay, so here's where we are. Here's a recommendation. Now give us the direction to move. There's a lot of feedback that will take place between the discussion today and when we come back again with various employee groups. But that's kind of the high level. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Aaron and the team, because this does get pretty deep into the weeds really fast. So I'll let the experts take it from here.
Yeah, with that, we're gonna just jump in here and I'll switch the screen over. Perfect. So yeah, thanks for the introduction, Dr. Lexman. And I want to thank the team that's been working on this. Ken Zastros here is a senior partner at National Insurance Services. Ken works with us on behalf, kind of as a middle vendor with Mid-America, who we currently have our HRA through. I want to thank Jessica Johnson. She's in the back room here. She's our active employee benefits specialist, spent a lot of time working with us intermittently along with the transition from WIA Trust to United Healthcare. So big thanks to her. And then big thanks to Jill Rakowski, who's currently out, and then Michael Komsker, district accountant. So they've spent a lot of time on this. And this started, as Marty mentioned, to go about a year ago, but really discussions with the board have started, before that as well. Sorry. We're quiet tonight here. So the presentation's long. And so with that, I've built in time, specifically slides for questions for you to be able to hear what we're saying, digest it, ask questions, as opposed to waiting till the end. I feel like that's better for collaboration and to move through this. And then really, as Marty said, we're hoping tonight to get a pause, to get some sense from you as the board of like, is this the right direction? Get some feedback, and then really take a pause on this and let us go to some of the constituents, the associations, the staff and employee groups, and let them hear kind of what we're thinking. And then we'd come back to another workshop with the board to kind of, at that point, depending on the feedback, a trimmed down version of this a bit to have another conversation. So just get some process going. In front of you, I handed out a folder, and that folder, when you open that on the left side, has some graduated scales that we'll talk through. They're difficult to read on the slides. So in person, being able to have them in front of you, we'll talk through at that time. And then on the right side of your folder is every employee group specific current language for our local benefit. So we have that trimmed down in here, but I figured if you wanted to read that more in depth, I wanted to have you to have that in real time. So just some background on what that is for you this evening. So with that, we're going to jump into our agenda. So first, we're going to start with what is OPEB, and OPEB again is other post-employment benefits. It is kind of a easier way to think about it. It's what the district offers their employees when they retire, not what the state of Wisconsin offers. Very different things. We'll talk about that. So what is it? Why do we have it? We'll talk about other post-employment benefits. We'll talk about what the difference is, and Ken will speak to this a bit more, of unfunded plans versus defined contributions, the difference in what they are. And then kind of what those plans look like, a 403B, an HSA, an HRA, different options for what districts use and other agencies, private and things like that. And then we'll talk about more specifically, what are our current retirement language, getting into the packet a bit more, right? And then what are our recommendations, and then questions, next steps. That's kind of a quick summary. So as I mentioned a minute ago, OPEB, or other post-employment benefits, are really just benefits other than the pension that employees may begin to receive from their employer once they retire. What that looks like can be a variety of things. So private companies may offer HRAs, 403Bs, stock options, deferred compensation. School districts pre-Act 10, it was very unified, very similar district to district. It was kind of the canned thing was health insurance, sick leave, YOS is years of service, and et cetera, depending on the district. And then post Act 10, it really does range. Some districts, as Ken will speak to, offer nothing. Some offer a little bit of what we do, but not other parts. So it's really a range. But the theme is most districts are offering what's called an HRA, defined contribution. We'll talk about that in a minute. They have some form of early retirement options. And then districts, depending on the district, some offer sick leave, some do not. So the theme of this slide is, even though it's called OPEB, you've heard of these benefits. We may have just never called them OPEB. So why do we have local employee benefits? So now more than ever, differences in employee benefits are driving staff from one district to another. Benefits include compensation, so salary, health insurance costs, things like dental, vision, things like that. So really, it's in the best interest of us and the employee to offer these quality benefits, because at a time where we have a hard time, all districts retaining employees, this is one of the main reasons people move. So we want to offer retirement options and plans and that are regionally competitive and comparable and really easy to understand. And that should be the goal of employers and employees. So kind of the example I give here is, if you opened your packet and looked at one of those plans, and I was in a room with every teacher in the district and asked them what they get when they retire, very few of them would raise their hand. And the few that did are probably the ones closest to retirement, right? And if I asked that same group, do you know what your salary is? Every person would probably raise their hand, because the best benefits are the ones you use. And if you ask an employee who uses health insurance what their premium is every month, they know what that is, right? But the one that doesn't have our health insurance and declines it doesn't know, because the best benefits are the ones you use. So having a benefit like a retirement option that they know and they are engaged with is to the benefit of us and them. And so that's what we're one of the things we're trying to accomplish tonight. So just a quick difference. Many of you probably know this, but local retirement benefits on the left are provided by your employer or your school district. As I mentioned before, oftentimes include sick leave, health insurance, or an HRA/HSA, life insurance coverage, and other benefits depending on the district. The WRS, or the Wisconsin Retirement System, is a separate entity that is not decided by the school district. That is a state agency that has a dictated pension for all state employees. that's provided by the state of Wisconsin. It's determined by a number of factors, which include years of service and highest years of compensation. And your eligibility and vesting are based on your age and years of service. So just want to be very clear, they're separate. Tonight's presentation has nothing to do with WRS. Other post-employment benefits or OPEB. We're going to jump in and talk a little bit about this. So what is an unfunded local benefit? So unfunded is the key here, and it's a benefit paid out to an employee at the time of retirement. Retirement under such plans was allowable as early as age 55, and that was kind of pre-Act 10 and now determined by your local school district. So it was kind of unified. Everyone pre-Act 10, 55 was the retirement age. It lined up with WRS, and then post-Act 10, it changed. A lot of districts decided to move that. We are one of those districts. Our current retirement age for teachers is 62. At retirement, the district would contribute a percentage towards health insurance and premiums for a set number of years or until Medicare. And then similar to, as I mentioned before, depending on the district, employees might receive paid insurance, district paid sick leave, and district paid years of service. But I want to mention this, unfunded means we don't fund it during active employment, which means at retirement, it'd be like you not putting any dollars away for retirement. And then at retirement, go, how much do I need? And hope you have it, right? So we currently have this dollar amount for retirees budgeted, but we do not contribute to those retirees during active employment. That's the difference between unfunded and defined. So kind of prefacing why it's problematic, right? Unfunded practices really across the state ended post-Act 10 due to a decrease in funding. And given that it's unfunded, schools don't fund employees and benefits until they retire. I mentioned that before. So this is kind of an interesting statistic here. So in 2021, we ranked in the 92nd percentile for OPEB benefits, meaning that we, compared to the rest of the state, are one of the richest plans for employees. And then comparatively, we rank in the 28th percentile for active employee compensation, which is really salary. And then last year, our total budget of our budget, 3.5 million was line itemed for retiree liability, which was a reduction due to the Anthem move. So really it was 4.5. So this board, along with we've worked collaboratively to reduce that, but that's currently what we're at. And some of the reasons that is escalating health insurance costs. We've been a part of different renewals where, 8% is the industry standard. Ken could speak to that a little bit later as well. But the theme here is that currently our plan doesn't retain active employees. And not that that's the only reason, but certainly it's one of them, right? So this is a slide that I really I felt was powerful getting into the data here. And so I want to just speak to that a bit. So as you can see, this is a bar graph in bands of 5. And then when you get to 20, it's kind of 20 plus, right? So I want to just speak to some of this. So, from an organizational perspective and change and growth and academic excellence, it's very difficult for any organization to have half their employees, nearly half, within the first 5 years of their career. And then really that trajectory starts to decline, meaning that once they're in the 3 to 5 year range, based on this data, we would expect them to no longer be working for us when they hit 6 to 10 and certainly by 11 to 15. So this to me at least tells a story that we do have a problem with retaining employees, and it's very difficult, I can imagine, for our employees to come in and work with our students and make real gains to be able to be sustainable when every 5 years we're retraining half our staff. So it's just something to note. The average teacher age in this picture is 38. When the group that are 20 plus years, the 14.7 retires, our average teacher age will be 28.5. Just to give you some reference there. I think the data is powerful for you to know. And I think it tells a story. And I think I want to note this, changing this plan will not solve this picture. But what this will do, it will free up dollars for the board to try to fix this problem. So something to think about. So what is the actual cost of the district? So this is the Millman study that was produced. You can see the increase in 22. That's going to be attributed to the early retirement package for number of employees choosing to engage with that. That'll decrease over time. So 2 questions I have when I look at this. One, if the plan hasn't changed, Why is the number decreasing? Well, that really goes right back to this slide, because less and less people are seeing it through, right? Why hasn't it decreased at a higher rate? Because of escalating health insurance costs. And so when you have two things like that, you have kind of a stable bar, which is a range of price that caught a liability to the district of around 2 to 4 million, depending on things like early retirement, things like that change. So that is kind of the current picture. This is an interesting idea. And what this does is it breaks down kind of our loss ratio. So we've talked about this in terms of health insurance costs to the district in terms of what premiums employees pay that are retirees versus active. So what I thought it'd be interesting to break down what does a loss ratio look like for an active employee versus a retiree employee? And so, every year it's a different picture because people have different needs each year and things happen. And so each year it looks a little different, but you can see since 2020, our retiree loss ratio is the way the language, the verbiage goes in the health insurance field, has far surpassed that of our active employee ratio. And I want to just give these numbers some reference for you. So 80 to 85% in a loss ratio would be about a 0 to 3%, 2% increase around there, 0. And the way that is 80% is kind of the baseline, 80, 85 for health insurance, because 15 to 20% is administrative cost overhead. So when you take 21 or 22 and you average those out and you're in the 95, 100, that's where you get, 10 to 12. And then with our vendor, the negotiations begin, they've got us to 8 usually, right? And that's kind of where things have landed. So this is another piece of the picture, because really this goes back to what is the total compensation package for an active employee? And really, if this was split out, active employee insurance would be much cheaper for them. And so just something to note, because we're talking about health insurance tonight, really, right? And so interesting piece. So with that, a lot of information. Any questions of Ken or I at this point?
Any questions from anybody?
Okay, we'll keep moving. So that leads us to, we've kind of presented what we have, or what it is and why it is a problem, and kind of what our total liability looks like. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ken to talk through like what are options, what have other districts done, and kind of what does that look like?
Yeah, Bear, thank you. So appreciate the time tonight to be able to be here with you guys. But I've worked with a lot of schools, 20 years with National Insurance Services, and the last 16 of them being in this role, have helped restructure a lot of post-employment benefit designs and plans, and have kind of run the gamut. And you'll see we have some comparisons of just some other districts where we've done, that are similar in scale and size to you, and it's kind of all over the map and how they operate. But moving to the defined contribution plan has become a major post-Act 10 and goal for most. Becomes more affordable, more sustainable, just overall a better design, right? And you'll see as we get into it, when we start looking at some of these graduated scales that Aaron mentioned that are in here, this is the powerful piece, I think, for the board and the decision-making team when looking at it, where we can try to provide some sort of benefit value that's equal to or very similar to what's in place, and it costing less money. I mean, that's just providing a benefit that's great for the staff and the retirees when they leave. Hopefully it's something that keeps them here and retains them, but then also being good stewards of the public funds with how you're funding these benefits and letting the time value of money pay for a lot of it. The next little bit here, before we get into the specifics, talk through kind of the options. We've talked about HRA. Marty mentioned HRA when he started this. We have HSA and 403B. I'll go through a lot of those. HRA is really where most folks have landed. Reason being, and you're not dissimilar, your current post-employment benefit is very heavy in the health insurance piece, right? I provide health insurance for, X number of years, depending on where you fall on one of these charts, that varies. The reason HRA becomes a great vehicle is because it is tax-free, just like the health insurance, and then you use it for health insurance costs and medical expenses, etc. We can go through the differences as those, but that's where HRA is the start, just because we haven't done it a lot. I know that's where most people line up, and you'll see through the side-by-side comparisons, the differences. But if you're not familiar with a health reimbursement arrangement, you have one in place already with Mid-America for a select number of groups. It's an employer-funded benefit account, again, completely tax-free. It's interest earning. Your contributions go in tax-free, so the employer money is not taxed by FICA, payroll, et cetera. It earns interest. That interest is never taxed. And then you use the money in the account, or that retiree or end user uses the money in that account completely tax-free. Never shows up on a W-2, never shows up on a 1099. I stress that because that's, to me, where, you know, you can draw a pretty good line across from providing health insurance benefit to providing an HRA, because those two components line up in terms of the taxation. There are two types of HRAs. There's an integrated, which we're not talking about here. We're focusing on the retiree only. So this is just a plan utilized for retirees, and that would include active employees that receive a contribution to a plan with no access to that benefit until they retire, having met whatever criteria you have. So just want to make sure we're aware of that definition. So retiree only just really means when you have access to the money. So you can receive the contributions while you're employed. You just don't get access until you've met whatever requirements and actually retired. So here goes into a little detail what that is. It's established for the sole benefit of retired employees. Technically, you can have no more than one active employee on the plan. That's defined by ACA. We don't run into that a lot. All 213D medical expenses are premium only. That's really determining how you want the account to be set up. We'll talk through what that looks like. For this purpose, for a lot of what we're looking at, we're talking about a premium only plan, which would be used for health, dental, vision, long-term care, Medicare Part B, Medicare Part D, and Medicare supplement premium cost, right? So your current post-employment benefit that has been changed over the years is we provide your premium cost to continue on our plan at whatever percentage for X number of years. So the premium only plan for the HRA would mirror that, would actually open it up to allow for use for some of those other things like the Medicare costs and Medicare sub. So a couple ways, and when we get into the specifics of talking about how we're going to use these, so the HRA can be used two ways. Number one, depositing a dollar equivalent at the time of retirement, right? So you have some folks that will retire and gain access to a retirement benefit. Instead of paying those insurance premiums and just having them continue on your plan, you could actually put those dollars into an HRA. It's cost neutral for you, but they get the flexibility and the freedom to use those HRA dollars to maybe seek healthcare elsewhere, or get on a spouse's plan and still have that money banked, not take the district insurance in retirement, which could help with a little bit of that loss ratio performance piece that Aaron was mentioning. Then the big driver here is depositing into a defined contribution account. So an annual amount on behalf of, you know, a new hire or a more recent hire, and trying to deposit something into their account every year, watching the time value of money, the interest earnings, start building some of that, and then having met your criteria of age, years of service, whatever they may be, and you will have pre-funded a benefit essentially for them to walk out the door. So those are the two uses: a deposit at retirement or a deposit while actively working with no access. So this is just showing some HRA pros and cons, so we understand kind of what we're going into, eyes wide open. It's, you know, a sustainable benefit. Let me be struggling to read it there. Yeah, creates an incentive to retire early, helps bridge that gap, which is what we're trying to do, that Medicare gap that your current post-employment benefit is bridging. Employees really choose when and where, how to use that money. So now once they have money in an HRA, they have some flexibility. Maybe district's insurance wasn't the best option for them, but they took it because that's what the benefit was. Maybe they have a spouse who's still working and they could, you know, use these dollars later in Medicare and get covered on the spouse's plan, or use the dollars to supplement the cost of a spouse's plan. Or maybe they just found that they could go find an individual plan, you know, and that was going to cost them less money, and it insures them at a better level than where they maybe were overinsured or underinsured, however you want to look at it on the current plan. The cons, just to point those out, is the HRA is completely tax-free, but it can only be used for those qualified medical expenses and premiums. So you can't take this money out to go buy a fishing boat or a log cabin in retirement, or a Corvette, or whatever you want to do when you celebrate your 30 years and exiting the school district. So it's only for those qualified medical expenses and premiums. And then there's a lot around this. We get into the details of the design, but access must be suspended if you return to work. Again, this is a retiree only plan. So if you return to work and you have access to the retiree only plan, you'd have to suspend access to it because you're back working and no longer retired under the retiree only HRA.
Question, Chris.
When it comes to qualifying medical expenses, is it like the medical issues that would normally be covered by our current like healthcare plan? Or is it like saying, oh, you can do XYZ, but you can't get a new hip? Like, how does that?
Yeah, so HRAs can be used for all qualified medical expenses, so all 213D eligible expenses, which are IRS code section, and that would be everything you could use like a flexible spending account for. What we're talking about here for the retirement purposes would be a premium only plan, which would be used for just the premiums related to health, dental, vision, long-term care, or Medicare. So not the individual expenses.
Okay.
So, and you'll see, so we're trying to lay out the options and kind of, you know, what the analysis that's gone on with other schools and where you come down to the vehicle determination. But when you get into some of the design that we're looking at, you will explain the reasons why you have to use a premium only HRA versus using an all 213D HRA.
I just hate that word qualifying because
Yeah.
I've been denied stuff and it's like, no.
Yeah.
So.
It's a negative word in the industry. I agree. Yeah. Go, no question?
The other option, the other con about having suspending for rehired, so is rehired meaning that you're a benefited employee or
Yes.
you're a sub?
Benefited employee, like if you were retired and came back to work and then had to hit the threshold to then be receiving WRS where we're mandated to have those contributions, we don't really have that. People that come back to work stay under the hour limit, so they would still be eligible to be receiving their HRA in that circumstance.
Okay.
Yeah, we did talk about that
So-
too, but we it's kind of a non-starter. We don't have that really happen. Or people, because then they'd suspend their, yeah, it's a whole thing, so.
Right,
Yeah.
it would suck to not have any benefits at all. You can't access the HRA and you don't have health insurance to
Right.
be able to use it. And we, you know, retirees, a lot of times they do come back and work in some
Absolutely.
capacity for us after they leave. And so I would hate to lose that, especially with the state of the teaching profession and how many fewer people are going into it every year, that we might need to really tap into that. That pool of people who are retired to be able to keep educating and making sure our staff that we do have, don't get burned out.
Yeah, from an operations perspective, we would be in a really tough spot if all our retirees at tomorrow could not work for us. So that would be, I agree.
So to share, so we have a bulletin written by legal counsel that basically explains the rules along the rehire, which would mean incidental, substitute teaching, you know, doing the chains for the Friday night football game, taking tickets at the basketball game, you know, those types of things would not, you know, disqualify you from still using and accessing your account. But coming back in a benefit eligible capacity, then you know, you'd likely have to suspend to avoid, you know.
Okay, that's clear enough.
Yep.
All right, so another option that a lot of folks look at is 403B. That is, you have that in place currently for some of your years of service and sick leave payouts. It's we call it a special pay plan, but it's essentially just an employer sponsored 403B. You can set up defined contribution plans to pre-fund your post-employment benefits with the 403B. Really, in terms of the employer setup, there's no difference between the two. It saves all the FICA and payroll tax, no matter which one you're putting the money into. What I like to mention though, is what is the end result of the dollar, right? How far does your dollar go for that retiree, and kind of the nature of how you've established the benefit. So right now it's health insurance, completely tax-free. $1 every, 100 pennies of every dollar go towards the benefit that you're putting away now. The same would be for an HRA. 100 pennies plus interest earned in that HRA would go towards the benefit. 403B becomes kind of not a bridge the gap to Medicare anymore. It's not a health insurance. It's just to kind of thank you for your 25, 30 years. And here's some money you can go use for whatever you want, right? So 403B, you can use whatever buy whatever you want with it. Ultimately, you will get taxed. So you're going to get taxed, 25, 30 cents on every dollar that comes out of there. And you have to have certain age restrictions met in the 403B world in order to get access to that money. You need to be 59 and a half to access the money without penalty. You still pay the tax, but there isn't an additional penalty, whereas HRA doesn't have those restrictions. So you could technically retire at 57, let's say, with HRA and access those dollars, whereas you wouldn't be able to in 403B. So just put those two together.
This one's really a non-starter when we're talking about post-employment benefits. So someone will sit in meetings and I just put it out there so people see it, but they'll say, well, what about an HSA? I've heard about that. HSA is a great tool tied to your health plan. It's an awesome vehicle. Private sector uses it a ton. You build a balance in an HSA, you cannot use it for early retirement premiums prior to Medicare eligibility. So again, if we're trying to address a situation of bridging the gap to Medicare, early retirement at 57, 60, 62, and covering that gap to 65 when I become Medicare eligible, HSA dollars do not help you with that outside of COBRA. You get COBRA to use the money, which is 18 months. So anyone that retires prior to 18 months wouldn't be able to use HSA dollars. So that's where we just kind of, acknowledge that it's there, and we can answer the question that is probably not the best fit for a post-employment benefit. So
Getting into the recommendation. So like, given that information that Ken shared, and in comparison to other school districts, the HRA model to us and to other area kind of schools seem to be the best fit for them and what they were trying to do. So that would be kind of a recommendation moving forward in terms of what the next part of the presentation looks like. And then Ken also went through and kind of put through some of the examples of other area districts to kind of show where, when they made this switch, where did they land, right? So you can see Elmbrook, they provided a catch up for prior years when they switched to move people onto this plan, catch them up for their annual contribution plus some interest. And they kind of landed with, administrators there in Elmbrook, $2,000, teachers, $1,000, support staff, $500. And then, a vesting schedule 50% at 10 or 15 years. They must have had a phased in approach there. And then 100% at retirement, and then sick leave for some groups, right? Because every district's going to be different. And then there's going to be a if and then. The if is going to be, if you were here when we transitioned, you get this. And if you weren't, then you get that, right? So when you read this, it's sometimes a little confusing, but that's kind of the reason. Oak Creek Franklin, teachers, $2,000. They've doubled Elmbrook. They get no sick leave, right? Payout at retirement, and they're 100% vested only at retirement. So you can see the differences, right? So higher amount, there might be kind of an if and then, right? Cudahy, they have a similar approach. Shorewood, kind of similar to Elmbrook there, and then currently New Berlin has no benefit. So it's really all over the board. So with that, any questions on what Ken shared, or I can leave this slide up if you're still reading too. Questions? Okay. We're going to jump right into the next section. So now we're going to get into the specifics tied to some of the retirement language you have in your packet. So not for the intent to bore everyone, but I want to go through each employee group's language a bit so you can kind of see what is actually written. And, some of it will surprise you, I think, and to see what some of our employee groups receive at retirement. And we're going to address that in our recommendation too. So to kind of, with any plan of action and change, we try to have a goal statement and then priorities that align to those goals. So if a question comes up, why this? It's likely aligned to one of the priorities. So trying to give you some frame of reference for how some of the decisions were made. So the goal statement, similar to the background we shared, is to shift as many active employees from our current plan design to a defined contribution HRA while providing staff with a meaningful, high quality benefit. How do we do that? What are the priorities? Priority one, in no order of ranking, offer a rich and comparable benefit to our current retirement package. So I want to say that again, we designed these plans that you're going to see based on the monetized value of what they receive for their health insurance. So if someone receives 3 years at retirement under our current plan, we monetize the 3 years and tried to develop an HRA that meets that or exceeds that. Okay. 2, decrease our future OPEB liability by committing dollars during active employment. That's moving from unfunded to defined, essentially. We really strongly feel that lowering our retirement age to align with area districts is in the best interest of the organization. Most districts have moved back to that, moving to the retirement age of 57. And so that's something that we believe should be a strong recommendation of the board. That said, we want to honor staff who are within 5 years of retirement, meaning they're 57 years old and have 15 years of local service, WAWM service. By not changing their plan, we feel that, pulling the rug on someone that's knocking on the door, they probably have planned on this plan. They've met with retirement plannings to talk about what their plan is. changing that at the final hour doesn't seem fair. We'll talk more about that if they felt like this new plan we could talk about that in a minute. We have some options for them too. We talked about this with health insurance. We believe reducing our long-term loss ratio to provide staff with cheaper health insurance premiums for active staff is important. So this plan, our approach will address that as well. It aligns with our strategic plan for long-term fiscal stability and efficiency. It also to that, our next point, provide all staff with a high quality post-employment benefit. And lastly, as I mentioned before, this will take some time, but it will allow the board in future years to commit future dollars to staff compensation or whatever the priorities of the board at that time. So currently our budget item for what we currently have is 3.5 million. When this plan's fully implemented, at the worst, the maximum, it would be just under 1.4 million. So we'd be decreasing it by $2 million and offering staff a better or a comparable benefit. So. Okay, so we're going to jump into this is the teacher group. So each slide looks the exact same with the language at the top being different. And the bullets are going to be the summary of what they receive. So if you want to just jump and look at it quick, look at the bullets and that'll tell you exactly what they get. And then I'm going to just make a few comments about, the dollar amount or what's different each slide. So teacher salmon group. So you can see the salmon group is going to be the last plan that we have, the oldest plan that we have for teachers. So that group receives years of service payout. They receive 50% of their sick leave up to 280 days at retirement. They receive one level of life insurance. I put in here number of active employees because I think you should see how many people on this plan are we talking about, right? There's 18, 6 of them qualified for the board approved early retirement last February. So really we're talking about 12 people. Right? If those 6 decide not to go by next June of 24, then they would default into what we're talking about tonight. I imagine most will decide to take that option the board passed, as most have. But the other 12 would fall into the 57 and 15. So nothing would change for this group. But you can see the last one, the health insurance benefit, given the retirement age for this group is 59, they would receive 6 years of health insurance. Each year of health insurance is valued at about $25,000. So you can kind of start doing the math there. And then they receive 5 years of Medicare eligibility at 50%. To give you some reference, our cost, once an employee is Medicare eligible, our cost is $2,000 per year. So compared to $24,000 post Medicare. So when you add up the 6 years, $25,000 at 6 years, it's 150, and then 5 years at 50%. Well, 50% of 2000 is 1 times 5 is 5,000. So that's where we come to that conclusion. Green, you can see it's a much condensed slide. It's less information, meaning the plan is less rich, really. So green and white are the same exact plan. I do not know why. They are the same exact plan. The only difference is the color. So green has different years for graduated scales, but the content information is the exact same. It states, so this is our current plan I'm describing. So I'm going to just jump through these two quickly, is teacher on a green or a white plan has to receive these benefits, has to meet the 2 criteria of age 62 and 20 years of local service in the district. If they do, they receive 50% of the sick leave at 280 days total, 1 level of life insurance. Green has 12 people on that plan because this is the older, right? What green became before white, and all 12 qualify for early retirement by the board last February. But you can see the total dollar amount here is $77,000 because they're guaranteed 5 years of insurance at 62. Well, what does that mean? They really only get 3 years of insurance because at 62, at 3 years, that puts them at 65. And then they get Medicare sup from us, which is $2,000. So 3 years times 25,000 is 75. 2 years at 50% is 1,000 each year, $77,000. The same is for green, is for white, but you can see the number of employees at white jumps from 12 in green to 612 in white. So the vast majority of our employees that are teachers fall under the white group, white plan. So, okay, so that kind of paints the picture for teachers. Our recommendation, given that we have $7 million in committed dollars in our fund balance for this project, is, as you can imagine, we can't move every teacher tomorrow to this model, right? So we kind of have a graduated scale that we are going to be looking at, and we'll get to that to the recommendation at the end here. But really, our recommendation will be that we will move all teachers with 5 years of less of district service as of June 30th of 23 to an HRA to meet the priority of matching or making their current plan better than what they currently receive. We propose annually a $2,000 amount into an HRA. And then the vesting schedule we currently have that's similar to other area districts, that's going to be a discussion point this evening with the board is, that's what's possible. 25%, like if someone left at year 10, they would receive 25% of the allocation in their HRA, 50% at 15 years, 75% at 20, and 100% at retirement. We can have that discussion towards the end of the evening this evening, but you'll see that as the theme throughout the presentation. Certainly not married to that. That's just what we have in. So you can see the next section, financial impact. So if we moved teachers under 5 years, that's 284 of those 612. To move all of them with no interest, so giving them the 2,000 per year for every year they've served with us, but not giving them interest would be 1.536 million. To honor the interest at 5% would be 1.635. Given the difference, I think honoring that, the recommendation will be to honor that with interest at this point, to move someone to that plan. That is teachers. Next employee group is at will. And so this is the same structure, right? This is phase 2, the old plan. Just to jump through this, there's only 5 employees on this phase 2. All of them are 57 or have 15 years. So really, this is kind of a moot point for that group. The current plan has 56 employees. This plan nearly mimics the teacher plan. The only difference is you can see the health insurance benefit is 75, not 77, because this employee group, when they hit Medicare eligibility, get nothing. The difference was the teacher group got 2 years of Medicare sup district paid. Okay. Our recommendation, given that our goal is to move as many employees as we can, is we move all at wills under 15 years of service in the district as of June 30th to the HRA, given that their plan is literally the exact same within $2,000 of the teachers. The annual amount that would go into that HRA is the exact same. It's consistent. As you can imagine, given that there's less employees, the catch-up contribution would be 606,000 without interest or 756,000 with interest, an annual contribution of 96,000, which is really going to be 48 employees times $2,000. Okay, that's at wills. Administrator group, phase 2 old plan similar to at wills. There's 2 people on this plan. All of them are going to be over the 57 and have 15. So for this phase 2 group, this is kind of a new point. Moving on to the next group, phase 1 current plan. I think it's actually called current plan. Sorry, I get these really mixed up. Administrator group who retired beginning in 22 school year and thereafter are qualified to retire at age 60, not age 62. So it's a little different for administrators than at wills and teachers under this current language. Still need 20 years. Given that they can go at 60 and not 62, they actually get the full 5 years of insurance. So you can see the health insurance benefit is not 77,000, it's 125,000, which is really just 5 years times 25,000. And they receive, so beyond that, they get the sick leave that teachers receive, and they get 1 additional level of life insurance that's different. So the recommendation is to move all administrators with less than 15 years of experience as of June 30th. The deposit, the annual amount is higher. It's 2,500 recommending, because if you go back to this slide, the current benefit's 125,000. So if the goal is to match that up, $2,000 doesn't match to that, 2,500 does. So that's the reason for the difference. So the catch-up contribution is without interest 432, with interest 540. Annual contribution is 70,000, 28 employees. So now I'd like to turn your attention to your packet to look at the graduated scale. We're going to start with, in your packet, you're going to see a scale top left. We'll say 5% rate of return. And then it'll be for 30 years, $2,000. your deposit. So what this, and I'll let Ken kind of talk through this in a second, but what this does is show the power of interest. So if an employee started here as a teacher and we deposited $2,000 a year over 30 years, the district cost would be 60,000. 2,000 times 30 years is 60 grand. But if that staff, if our, the power of the stock market, 30 years averages, if they received a 5% rate over the 30 years, the $2,000 per year would turn into, so a $60,000 investment would turn into just under $133,000. So currently, as I mentioned before, a staff member receives a $77,000 benefit. So your question might be, why are we offering $130,000 benefit when we currently offer 77? It's a fantastic question. Thought of it myself. Okay. Well, currently we would only be depositing 60,000. They currently are district paid 77,000. So from the get-go, as of today, we'd be spending 17,000 less. In 30 years, what is 77,000 going to turn into? Health insurance costs are going to go up every year for 30 years. So 77,000 using similar rates of return is going to get you around $130,000. But what's key here is it won't cost us $132,000. It'll cost us 60. It's a fixed amount. So you go, well, this year it's only going to save us 17,000 per teacher, but in 30 years, it's going to save you literally 51 cents on every dollar. That's the power of what this kind of proposal does. So the savings, even though short-term you will have savings, long-term you will have exponential savings for staff and for the district to be able to contribute to whatever the priorities are of the board at any given time.
With a larger retirement payout, correct? In that sense.
Yeah, essentially every staff member would receive, like pending the health insurance market, would receive more dollars to do that. Yeah. Yeah. But we're trying to think about long-term picture here. And so, if for some reason the health insurance market goes crazy and doubles, the board has the ability, we can relook at that and increase that amount as needed. But this is planning for that, I guess, foreshadowing that future a bit. So anything to add to that, Ken?
No, I would just say I started it off by saying this is, I think, the most powerful piece when looking at designing this type of plan. I will share just some of the details and semantics behind it. Within our HRA program, there's a 20 fund variable lineup that the employees would have the ability to choose from. The money would always default to a fixed interest account. We can get into that, but so we have a guaranteed fixed interest account with the investment provider. It's paying 1.3% for 2022. It's going to be, I think, 1.4 for 2023. It has a floor of 1% throughout the life of the contract. So what we do with all of our employers is we recommend that's the default. When you put someone's $2,000 in here for the teacher, you're not deciding what kind of risk tolerance they have or where any of that money is going. It defaults into a fixed, and it has at least that 1% guarantee for the lifetime of the contract. They then would have the ability, based on the rules established within the plan that you guys can design, the ability to direct that money outside of the fixed account into one of the 19 variable funds to try and chase down a higher interest rate and turn the 60,000 theoretically that you're going to give them over their 30 years into something more. I use 5% as an estimate when we're showing this. Numerous studies you can cite and find that the market typically returns 7 3/4, 8% over a 30-year period. I think it's a little short-sighted for me to come in here and put that number on it. And you guys go, oh, wow, we can provide a $160,000 benefit by giving them $750 a year. So that's why I utilize a different number and kind of put it in the middle there at 5. So that's just a little explanation. And so I'm a little neurotic the way I look at things, but I like the way the numbers, I like to see it 30 years. So that's why I have this drawn this way, because I like to see and show someone, hey, year 1, 2000, if you just scroll all the way across that top line and you get to 30 years from now, your $2,000 turned into 8,232, I'm like, I like to show that, right? As opposed to just the summary on the bottom. So that's why it looks the way it looks.
Before we move on to the next employer, any questions on the scale? I have one in there for 2,000 and 2,500 and 500, which we'll talk about in a minute, but any questions on that? Questions?
So how do they get to the 5%? Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Yep. So within the account, they have the ability to self-direct into the variable fund lineup, which has subject to market risk investments.
So do they meet with somebody and say, hey, I'd like to?
So they can, yes. So they have the ability to do it on their own if they want to.
Okay.
We within our team have licensed individuals that will work with them to do that. or they're welcome to take their HRA plan to their own financial advisor. Now, their own financial advisor can't move the money out of the HRA that you've established for them into something for, you know, that they're selling them. But they could make a recommendation to them of say, hey, put your money here, there, or wherever. Those are the three kind of options that they would have. But yeah, we certainly make ourselves available to sit down with them and go through that to help
So
them.
we would be providing an advisor to them.
Yep.
So
If you think long-term, the plan would be during new employee orientation because everyone else would already be up to date on this. We'd have annual meetings for them to come to, but really new employee orientation is when this information gets described and given to staff around schedule a meeting here. This is where you can do, you should do this. Here's the reason why. I mean, and there, obviously we would have built-in meetings annually for all staff to attend, but that's kind of where those things usually end up.
Okay.
With that, we're going to jump. Oh, question, no,
I'm
sorry.
just making sure there's no other questions.
Sorry.
Part of my job here.
Nope, I understand.
Everyone's good?
With that, we're going to jump into the,
Well, I was just gonna say more detail on it. Like I said, you guys make those decisions. So within the plan document, you can determine if and when they have the ability to self-direct the money. Right? So in this recommendation, the way we've worked it up, we're assuming and making the recommendation that immediately, once someone gets their $2,000, you as the employer are not gonna restrict what they do with it. We do have employers that say, oh man, we have a lot of turnover, or we want to have someone, you know, their money be subject to the fixed account for 5 years or 10 years. To me, then that kind of takes a lot of these assumptions away. So this is under the a premise that you automatically allow them to self-direct right away.
And would you recommend that we do that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
yeah, otherwise you're looking at, if you said 5 years, then the first 5 years, which as we all know, the power of investment's time, you're going to subject the first 5 years to a fixed 1.3, 1.4, 1.5%. So. yeah. Okay, moving on. Cleaners, it's another employment group here. So this is something to note where I mentioned before, something you might be surprised about. So when this plan was written for cleaners, and you'll see it for maintenance and secretaries, the group that wrote these was under the assumption that Medicare eligibility was moving from 65 to 67. So let me read you the language and you can see why. Cleaners who qualify for retirement beginning in 2003 and thereafter, age 65 and 20 years, receive 90% of health insurance premiums at the lower cost for 2 years. Given that Medicare has not changed, this employee group receives no benefit from the school district at retirement because Medicare is 65. 2 years of insurance prior to Medicare doesn't exist. So currently they receive no benefit. That'll be a theme amongst the next 3 employee groups.
I think it was part of the theme with the teachers that we didn't touch on, but when you mentioned, you know, why would we put 60,000 when the benefit was really only 77? It's only saving us 17. There's a lot of, you know, examples as to why we would do that. But part of the other one is they were, you know, retire at 62 and get 5 years of insurance. I think under the same assumption that Medicare was going to go to 67. So the intent was to provide 5 years of health insurance, not 3 years plus the 2 of Medicare.
Yes. So currently we have 10 staff that are cleaners and they receive a benefit of 0. So the suggestion, the recommendation is for all cleaners to move all 10, given their benefits nothing, and for us to provide a $500 annual retiree HRA deposit. Consistent with other district support staff, $500 seems to be what people are doing for support staff. And we would honor their years, and that would cost the district or us $57,000 with interest, 42 without, annual contribution of $5,000 per year, 500 times 10 employees, to give them something at retirement. So that's kind of a recommendation for cleaners. Educational assistance. So there's a few different plans here. Phase 1, old plan, there's 8 employees. Kind of a moot point. All 8 meet the 57 and 15. So we'll go to the next slide here. Current plan, 54 active educational assistants. It's the same plan as cleaners. So at retirement, that group of employees receives no benefit. So we'd recommend moving all educational assistants not in phase 1, meaning they're on the current plan, to the same option, given that they're support staff for our school district, the $500 plan per year. We have a lot of EAs, 54. So you can see the catch-up contribution is much higher than the cleaners. And then you can see a huge discrepancy between interest and no interest because we have a lot of cleaners with a lot of years. We have a lot of EAs who have been with our district and committed up their lives to us. So that is just something to note. A lot of dedicated employees there. So that's EAs. And then maintenance, it's the same picture as cleaners, 39 employees. Phase one, as mentioned, phase one has one person, I believe, and they're age 57 and 15, so that wouldn't apply. And then same thing here, 39 employees, $500 deposits annually, and then the breakdown of catch-up contributions. Secretaries, believe this is the last one. Old plan phase one, there's 2 employees. They're all age 57 or 15 or older, so that doesn't apply to this group, but you can see the plans become less rich as we go on. Phase 2, there's 1 employee who would be grandfathered in, given our recommendation that we talked about. So really getting to the current plan. So this plan is a little bit different than the cleaners, maintenance, and EAs because secretaries do receive sick leave payout on the scale you can see, but the health insurance benefit is similar to cleaners and EAs, so 0. So then our recommendation is we would not touch anyone anyway with phase 1 and phase 2, given their age, but moving all secretaries not in those 2 phases to this same option of 500 per year. And then that'd be about 35 employees. And that's the catch-up contributions with and without interest. So then in your packet, we provided a graduated scale for a $500 deposit. Given the same assumptions that Ken talked about, $500 over 30 years turns into just over $33,000. So certainly not the same benefit as teachers, but it's consistent with other districts and gives them a chunk of money to when they decide to retire. Should that be at 65 or 62? Can they jump on a significant others plan? I mean, there's options for people given their life circumstances to be able to have those dollars to use for something for health insurance. So let's get to the total financial picture, right? Getting to the end here. As I mentioned, the recommendation would be to move teachers under 5 years, at-will administrators 15 or less, EAs not in phase 1, secretaries not in phase 1 and phase 2, all cleaners and maintenance. The catch-up contribution totals without interest is 3.2 million, with interest is just under 4 million. And then an annual contribution of 803,000, and that would move roughly 500 employees over. So, a large portion of our staff over to this plan. I had some notes I wanted to make here. Sorry, I'm a little behind here. So I mentioned before, currently we have 7 million in committed fund balance for this. A couple things to note, just going back to this. So the first year would cost the contribution catch up plus the annual. So you're looking at around just under $4.8 million initially in upfront cost. But some of the reason why, that number is a large chunk of the 7 million, right? 4.8 is a good portion of that. Some of the reason why is that our actuarial study, and we showed it before, shows that our OPEB liability is decreasing. So the 3.7 million we're budgeting is going to be decreasing next year to $2.3 million. So we'll have 1.5 million in the budget that's currently budgeted for that we could use in future years as we move forward, essentially maintaining that 3.7 million to get us through to be able to start phasing. As that amount declines, our HRA will increase. The big cost is the catch up. The 800,000 can be easily absorbed in the 1.5 million every year forward. So the $3 million additionally, it's like, what are you gonna use that for? And we'll get to this at the end, one of the unforeseen things is when you move the retirement age down to 57, you could have an increase in 1 year of a bunch of people that decide to retire. So if that you saw what happened with early retirement, you saw the 4.4 spike, that could happen again. So trying to think of ways that we can still manage our budget, manage this plan, and have dollars that are committed for this reason available to be able to do that. That's kind of some of the thinking, just so you guys are aware. So cash flow analysis, you can kind of see the red here shows very top left of the screen. That's the 4.7 million I referenced for the HRA. That's going to be 800,000 in annual contribution and just under 4 in the catch-up. And then you can see this, the undefined plan, it's going to decrease a lot because you're going to see, like I said, as we move into the following years, you're going to see that number start to decrease per the Millman study, right? The unknown there is that number could actually bump up because you could see people leaving early to take the benefit. So it's a little bit unknown, but if it bumps up higher in 1 year, you're going to see it decrease quickly then, because those people who take the benefit early won't have the benefit later. So it's kind of a wash a bit. But you can see here up to 2026, I want to just show, look at the gap between the unfunded plan and the defined plan. That red line will never surpass 1.4 million. And that's if everybody took it and nobody ever left. If you assume a 15% default rate, meaning people leave, you're going to get 15% on that 1.4 million back every year, which can go to fund it in future years. So getting to the next piece here, which is the Fund 73 Trust, one of the recommendations that we will make later this spring, once we've kind of got some feedback, is to open a 73 Trust to be able to, using those defaults to pre-fund future years for people. So we're only talking about teachers 5 years or less. It would be really great in future budgets. The board has conversations every spring about, hey, we had a surplus this year. How would the board like to default or contribute those dollars to? It'd be great to have another option to be able to start looking at buying people out, to be able to move to these plans, to be able to align ourselves with one plan sooner. And so it allows the district and us a lot of flexibility to do that. It's a shared cost eligible expense, meaning that you're not putting money into fund balance only to take the hit on aid. It's same as Fund 46, but it can only be used for this purpose. And so when someone defaults, meaning they just, let's say they're here for 4 years and they say, hey, I gotta moving out of state, whatever the reasons may be, the dollars there come back to the district, but they go to the trust. And then the trust, we go, well, how much is in the trust? Well, it's 200,000. What do we need this year for annual contributions? We need this. So we could decide, do we keep funding it what we need every year? Or do we deposit that amount less what's in the trust every year as a budget item? So it allows some flexibility. So anything to add in that, Ken, or no?
No.
Okay. Right. Okay, questions before we get to recommendations, and this is, we're wrapping up here. Kristen.
I just want to make sure I have the numbers right.
Yep.
I need that's the most simplified idea.
Yep.
So we have 7 million already committed to this.
Yep.
Upfront cost would be about 4.8 million.
Yep.
Yearly, when we say yearly contribution, is that to the fund or how much the district has to put into it?
So the yearly at this point, for what it would cost for that number of employees to go, the annual contribution for just that group is going to be 800,000.
Okay.
Now, if you have 50 people decide to quit next year, then it's going to be the 800,000 plus the 50. That's why the number, the red line, kind of went up
Gotcha.
every year. It's dependent on how many people quit or retire, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then in future years, that 800,000, like we just mentioned, is, less whatever people have left the district and forfeited that was in their account that didn't meet the vesting requirements.
Yeah. So what'll happen over time, we'll hone in on a percentage. And then we'll come to know every year it's about 11.5 or whatever the number ends up being. And so it's kind of a bit of an unknown, but we've
Not to exceed the 1.4 you said. right?
yeah, total,
Okay.
all employees given the 500, 2,000, 2,500. If every employee was here every year, did not leave, it would be around 1.4 million. But that does not happen in any
It would just
district.
be Not gonna happen. That's
Yeah.
maybe pre-Act 10.
Yep.
stuff.
It will not
Out
happen,
there.
but to paint the worst picture possible.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But the thing is that's a defined, we know,
Right.
whereas now, depending what the health market does, who knows? What
I
you
just
have
have to
to
really
pay.
explain the numbers.
No, absolutely, Kristen. It's a good question. Yeah.
Other questions? Mr. Burns?
I don't know that I like this system, and I'm not sure why, but it kind of also sounds with the last statements that we said is, I guess the question is how fast are teachers burning out? Whether it's West Allis or not, most teachers are done before 5 years. And if we're doing this actually seems more like a predatory system, and that you're saying, hey, we'll give you this benefit if you retire here, but knowing most of them won't. And so you're saying in their peak earnings time, as you said, because time is the piece that will determine what we get. Those people that put in their 5 years and figure that teaching is not for them or anything else, we're essentially preying on who's going to quit in order to fund this. And for a district like ours that has high turnover, we're basically funding it by having all that turnover, because you're putting all that in. It's like, oh yeah, we have that, but they're never going to collect it. And I don't know that I like the system, the way we're talking about. I understand that it's cheaper. I understand that, but like $2,000 for your first year is $9,000 30 years later. So that money is valuable to people, whether or not they only put in a year to us or they put in 10 years or whatever. In order to fund this, we're encouraging people to leave.
But to counter that, they're not getting anything if they don't retire here now.
Exactly.
So they get no benefit at all, right? So, and number two, the money the district saves by doing this can be put towards salary, which is money they would get if they only stay for 5 years. So I think those are two strong points to this. If someone stays here 5 years and leaves, they don't get a retirement here now, which we're currently funding.
But this isn't a retirement. This is a retirement.
It's
benefit.
a
It's a
health care.
funding
It's a
for-
healthcare benefit.
It is, but for post, work. So it's not necessarily a retirement benefit. It's saying you're putting in your work. Here's money to pay for stuff after you're done working. And it's not, I mean, it's a retirement benefit, but it's at the same time, it's not, because it's out of our hands once it's in that thing. And it goes, I don't know. There's just something I don't care for about how the system is sitting, and I'm not sure that I can verbalize it.
One of the
Quite right.
things we've put out there for us to talk about is a vesting schedule, to your point, Brendan, around like if someone stays 5 years at currently how we have it set up, they would receive 25% of those dollars to take with them.
10.
10,
You did
sorry,
that 10.
10,
Yeah,
sorry.
10.
But that could be something that you put to 5. I mean, it's really a discussion point. So
So I guess my counter argument to that might be, if they know they're leaving money on the table and they were thinking of leaving it 4 years, maybe it makes them stay another year.
That's the.
Point of.
Exactly.
But
I mean, that's
That's a ridiculous standard. I'm 40 years old, 44 years old, and I've been in 6 different jobs.
yeah.
Like, you're not going to get someone for the most part to stay in the same job for 30 years. And so I think that's a ridiculous standard for us to be like, well, we want them to stay here. Well, yes, I want them to stay there. And would I love them to stay here for 30 years? Yes. But that's a ridiculous standard in this day and age. We are too mobile as people to be locked into a place where you're going to be there for the rest of your life.
But that's why those people typically are worrying about their retirements in different ways. If you are going to be that mobile, you can't rely solely on your employers to help subsidize that. I mean, the idea of these plans is to help reward people who are invested in a particular employer for a long period of time. That's why if you have a staggered vesting schedule, that's going to help incentivize you at certain points. I mean, I get your concern, but I think the reality of the situation is you need a way to be able to incentivize people to stay. And I think by doing that at different intervals, you're doing that while realizing that they might not stay 30 years. So you're incentivizing them at 5, at 10, at 15, or whatever that scale is. So they'll get something as opposed to walking away from everything. Like, I would totally be against something where, okay, you're fully vested at 30 years and that's it.
Yeah.
Like, no, that wouldn't make sense. But I think doing something at least where we're addressing it early and they're able to get a percentage where they're vested, I think that makes sense.
And just 2 points, kind of to go back to the beginning of the presentation, I showed that graph of our employees by band, right?
Yeah.
I know this plan will not address your concern, Brendan. If people want to leave, this is not going to be the thing that holds them. But what it will do is it will allow in future budgets, this board to decide, hey, you know what? If salary is the reason, that's the reason. If it's staff supports, not enough, you have dollars to do that. I don't know what the answer to that problem is. So I think that that's something worth discussing along with this. So, yeah.
Other questions?
The last thing I want to mention in our plan too, it just gets a little confusing, is we have here that if you retire, you receive 100%. And it seems obvious for the person that works, to Brian's point, 30 years, obviously you get the whole thing. if you come and work for 7 years and you're 50 years old and you decide, hey, I've had enough, I'm done, and you retire from the profession, you start your pension, we think it's reasonable, most districts do too, that they would get the whole thing. It's their last 7 years, they're done from the profession. We thank them for their service. That's what other districts do. That's just a point to make for you guys to talk about too. Because they would never have an option to meet the full vesting period. If they start at 50, it's like they weren't planning to work to 70, I imagine. So just so you guys, that's kind of an odd part there, but that's part of the.
No, I mean, it makes sense from a perspective of it. You're not giving all like the current retirement benefits to someone who only worked here for 7 years. You're giving the 7 years worth of investment of money that they put in.
Right.
For them to have completely and not having to do the scale that we have for someone who starts right out of college or,
Correct.
they've been teaching for 3 years and they come here.
Yeah. And the dollars would be in the account for them already. It's not like we'd be committing another portion of money.
Right.
you
It's
know.
not like, and on top of that, you get this, this, and this.
Correct.
right?
Yeah,
It's-
yeah. Yep. They wouldn't get the sick leave and all that. They just get that.
Right.
Yep. Yep.
Well, my thinking is that, if we have an average teacher age of 28, they're concerned about salary. And we've talked about salary and compensation.
Yep.
And they're not concerned about retirement
Yep.
at that point because they're young. And so this plan would free up dollars for us to help with compensation and salary. And to me, that's going to keep employees. Plus, they're going to get the benefit of the HRA
Mhm.
when they retire. So that's why I feel strongly about it.
To that point, what we've seen with a lot of employers is you get a little bit more of an engaged staff member on their retirement benefit in this type of setup because they now see that money is going in each year. They can move it around in an investment. They can log in and look at their account. They get statements sent to them in the mail quarterly. It's not this, what color sheet am I on? And
I've never seen it
and
before.
it's 30 years
You
from now
know.
and I don't know. So to that point, they end up seeing a little bit more and getting more engaged in
It's,
the benefit.
it's really the theme amongst benefits. Health insurance benefit comes down to how engaged are you?
Yep.
How, the same thing, how engaged are you around your plan? Well, currently there isn't much. And so that's a part of the problem.
And I do, I have 4 grown children that are in the business world. And they are, like Brendan said, they've moved jobs like 3 or 4 times already. And one of them's like 30 years old. And he's had to make these decisions. But he had to take pause and say, do I want to give up this benefit because I'm not vested? That's something that I think is part of being an employee and part of being part of an organization. And they might not stay 30 years, but I want them to take pause and say, hey, here's another reason to stay.
And to not to draw parallels, but the WRS is a system that parallels us, what we do, right? If you don't meet 5 years in WRS, you don't receive any of the employer contribution matches. It's 5-year investment. So not that we would mimic what they do, but I mean, there is some precedent in terms of what WRS has established around creating vesting schedules to some degree, whether that be what the board decides. So, okay, last step here before final questions, or just kind of wanted to go through in kind of order the recommendations we would be making pending some of the the time spent with employer group association, things like that. So number 1 is going to be what we just talked about. So we would recommendation 1, shift all employees below from our current plan design to a defined contribution HRA. I just want to say this again. I said it before, but this is just the health insurance portion. Currently, the sick leave, the life insurance that already exists would be remaining. This is just the health insurance piece. So teachers with really 1, assuming that this is their first year, 1 to 5 years of local experience, receiving $2,000 annual contribution ending in 6. So 5 years at the end of this year would be their 5th year. They would be in this. So as of June 30th, administrators at will under 15 years, and then all facilities and cleaners in those phases, and then secretaries and EAs who are under the current phase would receive the contributions listed as we talked about. Recommendation 2 is allow all employees who are the age 57 and have 15 years of district service will remain on their current plan as of 6/30. So if they turn 57 by June 30th and have 15 years, they would fall into this category. Note, I want to just make the note, this does not include or affect employees who received early retirement package, which is board approved in February 22. Should they elect to take the benefit prior to June of 24, If they take that benefit, then they get that benefit that we established then. If they do not, then they would fall into whatever group they are in. So that would be left to just be decided up to them. Okay. And then all secretaries and EAs who are under phase 1 and 2 will remain on their current plan as of 6/30/23. So just to make a note here. So a question, this is a good question. Let's say I am 57 and have 15 years. My plan's the exact same. Ken, my neighbor, is 56 and has 15 years. Ken would not remain in his current plan, but Ken under the new plan would get to retire at 57. He's 56. He gets to retire next year. I'm 57. I got to go to 62. I don't want to do that. Given that we are not changing my plan. If I want to opt out and go to this plan that I will talk about in a second, I would be opting out of it. But the district, I'm recommending the district does not change that, given that I would be within 5 years. Because there's always a winner and loser in these situations. And so what's taken so long is Ken and the team and I have been trying to think through options for people to be able to feel like that no one gets a benefit they don't get. And so that is something that I would recommend, is allowing someone to opt out. The question is, what does it look like? So we're going to talk about that. So recommendation 3, everyone in the middle, right? Teachers under 5 years, teachers within 5 years. What about the middle group? Okay. So all employees below will receive a monetary value of their current retirement benefit into an HRA retirement. Teachers with 6+ years of district service, but not those who have met the 57 and 15. What does that mean? So if you have 6 years or you're under 57 and 15, you would remain on your current plan in terms of your health insurance monetary value. What that means is if you're a teacher in this window and you get to 57 and you have 20 years, I'm moving ahead to recommendation 4, sorry. But if you are in the middle and you are turning 57 and you have 20 years, when you retire, we would take the 3 years that you're given under your current plan. You're 62, you get 3 years, and your 2 years of Medicare stuff. We would monetize that for you at the cost of our current health insurance, and it would be deposited into an HRA for you. And it's the same thinking around shifting to an HRA. So essentially their health insurance benefit would not change. It would not impact our OPEB liability because it's planned for us to have that cost. What it would do, because we can't move those employees yet, we don't have the cash to do all of everyone right now. What it would do though, is it would start shifting people off our health insurance post-retirement. What that would help us with is when we have renewals, our active employee insurance would get cheaper for active employees. So it's dedicating the dollars to that employee, the money that they were guaranteed to have in their current plan, but it would not be in form of health insurance. It'd be in the form of an HRA. Question, Noah?
It would not only be cheaper for for the current employees, it'd be cheaper for us too.
Yes.
Because overall rate goes down or is cheaper, then that's fewer dollars we're out, because we're paying the lion's share of.
Yeah, absolutely. It would reduce all of our premiums, the district's cost and the employees' cost. Yep. The goal long-term here is to try to, at some point free up dollars to be able to start buying people out. Most districts, and Ken could speak to this, when they moved, very few, right, had the dollars to shift everybody. I believe Shorewood and Marty or Ken could speak to this because they worked through that. They went to a referendum to do this. Oak Creek, I believe, did this in a staggered approach. They had, 500,000 here. Let's put it in the account and buy out this group. I mean, that's what they're trying to do. And that's the approach we'll have to take. But in the interim, this recommendation does help us in future years in a way. Yeah. Maybe speak to that a bit, Ken.
Yeah, no, I mean, everyone's kind of come up with the funding mechanisms a little different. Yeah. I was with Marty when they went to referendum in Shorewood for $10 million to buy out post-employment benefit liability. So that was an interesting experience, but yeah. So one of the other things I would share when we make this recommendation to deposit the dollar equivalent into an HRA at retirement. So not only on the investment side of things with, putting people in front of your staff and your retirees, when they get this HRA at retirement and have the ability to potentially go use it somewhere else, we have a team of actual individual consultants that will sit with them if they want to and help them find coverage with the HRA dollars, right? So don't feel like you're giving them this HRA and hey, go tackle the world of insurance, you who've never dealt with insurance ever in your life, right? So we'll put someone, an advisor in front of them if they want to help them do that, both pre-65 and post-65.
So that leads me to recommendation 4 is really all employees beginning in June of 23, recommending will be able to retire and receive local benefits if they've met the following qualifications. 57 years of age, which is a reduction from 60, 62, or 65, depending on the employee group. And have 20 years of district service, which is consistent with our current practice. And that's, to be honest, that really came from local other area school districts. This seems to be the theme amongst districts. It doesn't have impact on our OPEB liability, given that we're not providing individuals more retirement benefits at 57. We're just saying you can take the current benefit you get earlier if you want it. So there's no fiscal impact of doing that. And I think, honestly, I think it gives staff more freedom and choice. And I feel like part of the mobility that Brendan talked about is people want choice. They want freedom. They want to be able to make those decisions for themselves. And that seems to be what other districts are doing. So if we're one of the few left over here and everyone's moving over there, I think that's something that staff would appreciate. So. Any questions on that? I'll move to next steps. I kind of put some bullets in here, kind of what I'm thinking in terms of if the board is feeling good about this and wants us to proceed, kind of beginning to mid-January, looking at reaching out to the executive association to kind of talk this through and give them this presentation to them to hear and to kind of digest a bit. End of January, working with Dr. Stewart on creating focus groups for feedback around the proposed plan from staff. So we would reach out to all the schools and try to get representatives from different employee groups and, do something similar here. January 19th, the principal's cabinet for them to hear kind of what we're proposing, because they'll likely get questions from their staff around what did you hear? What is this? And so they would get something very similar to this that you heard tonight, because they have all these employee groups in their buildings. Similar to the health insurance proposal that we had, and we met with staff during professional development, worked with Ms. Raymer there to talk through around having dedicated time during the workday to talk through this with employees. So not outside of work, but giving them time during their workday to hear this information. So this is kind of a mock schedule for February 13th. So, looking at breaking that down and getting all employee groups information. And this would be much tiered down specific to that employee group, but them to hear that. And then, mid-February, looking at developing a Zoom optional session for people to get other questions answered. Late February, early March, have another workshop with the board. We'll be looking at mid-March as probably a realistic timeline for pending board approval, and then working late March at the creation of a trust in HRA accounts. And then by the June would be the timeline to get funds deposited. Okay, I am very,
Need some water?
I'm out of breath. So any questions, I guess, lastly, right?
First of all, just remind me again, so currently they're not getting the insurance benefits unless they've worked 20 years. Is that accurate?
And have met the age requirement.
And have met the age requirements.
Yes.
So with the recommendation, they would be earning at least a percentage earlier. We would be freeing up money to hopefully help base salaries or other things that could help retain employees. I will apologize because I realized that as I was talking before, I don't think there actually was a option for vesting at 5 years. If I remember right, it was recommended for 10,
Correct.
15, and 20. Which I still think makes some sense. I'd almost want to see something earlier. On a similar percentage rate, a 25, 50, 75, then 100. But I don't know what exactly makes sense. I mean, numbers of 5 just are easier, but you could do maybe a 6, 12, 18, or I don't know, something that. Because I think my concern is, and it's going to your point, Jane, I think if you're at 4 years, and if you stay one more year, you're going to get some of that money, it's at least going to make you stop and think a little bit. Whereas if that's 10 years out, that doesn't really help that conversation. If at 5 years, to Brendan's point, a lot of those people are leaving in that 4 or 5 year mark. They're not even going to think about that if it's 6 years down the road.
I'm certainly open to a different schedule.
We'll think about
Absolutely.
it.
I thought about it.
Well, they'll think about it, but it's not gonna be, it's a difference of,
I thought about it.
but it weighs differently if it's 6 years down the road as opposed to 1 year down the road. to
It,
get a
it
percent.
doesn't. It actually makes it worse. Because if you need to leave, you need to get out and it makes it that much worse because then you're trapped.
And
Because
you-
it's like,
yeah.
I have to do this in order to have that money. So it makes it worse to have to go there for that next year if you hate what you're doing
Well, yeah,
because
I can see
the
that.
system is not what you thought it would be. The community is not what you thought it'd be, or the interactions between admin and you are not what you thought they would
Yeah.
be. And so that's the other part of this too, is if we're talking about a vesting schedule, it's like, oh, well, they can make it 5 years. What if we go in and they don't mix with the admin and then the admin boots them out? They're not leaving because they want to, they're being non-renewed, so they have to leave, so they lose money, even though they're dedicated and want to do this. Now, if they suck and they're terrible and we're kicking them out because they have some violations, sure, yeah, get out of there. But if it's someone who it's like, well, our, educational mojo is not going together. Well, now I'm 3 years in, I only need 3 more years and I can make that. I want to make that, but now I'm being told I'm non-renewed. So what happens to them? Now they go to their next job and then they have to start over. So, I mean, these are the things that as we're doing this, I understand that this is cheaper. I understand this is a great plan for financial security for the district. But also we're talking about a profession where we're losing people like left and right. And so this seems predatory to me. I get like, if I had to vote on it, yeah, I'd probably support it because it's what's best financially for the district. I don't think it's what's good for the teachers though. And I don't know what better system there would be. Can the teachers donate in and it's like a match like the WRS? They do 100, we do 100. Can we do other things so that they have something for the time they put in?
Like a hybrid.
Yeah. Or we have somebody that's managing it and doing the money management. So instead of only getting 5%, they're pushing it and it's getting 10%. Like my person that does my finances does, they give me 10%. And then like the district covers like up to 5%, the employee gets it, the other 5% the district gets.
Well, we could just not have a plan and just give them a raise and they could take the money and do that. And just some
and
districts
maybe
do
that's
that
what
though.
we should do, but I mean.
Some
'cause
districts did
otherwise
it.
You're gonna look at this and it's gonna be like, now I'm losing, if I get up to 5 years, that's $10,000 that I've lost.
No, it's a fair
because
point.
Maybe I got non-renewed.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Some districts, New Berlin said we're not having it. Everything's gone. And they gave just, Ken could maybe speak to it if you know a little more. I don't have much information, but you can imagine local districts whose benefits are worse. We mentioned them. Elmbrook has $1,000. We can probably all reasonably guess Elmbrook teachers get paid more. Right? New Berlin teachers get paid more. They have no benefit. There's no option off the table. It's just that to change something like that for all staff, to say, hey, you get an increase, that we have to get rid of everything to do that,
No, and I understand that too. I'm
Yeah.
just saying that it's not as simple as like, well, they should stay here because they want to. They may want to, but the powers that be may not want them.
Yeah.
We have a principal that just had to go because of family. They wanted to stay, but now they're gone. So like, where does that leave them? And then that's just kind of like, well, and you lost 30,000, off you go, have fun. And I think that it's just, it doesn't sit right with me. But I understand financially, it's a good option if we want to give retirement benefits.
I guess I don't see it necessarily as, well, now you lost it, because essentially it wasn't really yours to begin with.
But we're talking about putting a report on there every year with their contract, and you're saying, oh, you've got this. So they think that they have that. Otherwise, it should be nothing. And then it's like, hey, 5 years, congratulations. There you go. Otherwise, it shouldn't be reported at all.
Could have this in.
If
But the point
Life's
is
about
that
choices.
by that,
It's a reward for, I don't know.
that
I guess-
engages the staff in their retirement. As Aaron was saying, like,
But as Brian was saying, they don't care about their retirement. So why are we bothering with this and just give them more money and not do the retirement?
I wouldn't say they don't care.
Well, I mean,
They will think about it differently than someone who's not. They're not gonna
because I
pay.
think it provides an
attention.
option for us to give them more of a, to increase salary with that extra money. But then also allowing them, okay, we know that younger people aren't really in, like, shoot. I'm 45 and I'm still like, what am I doing with retirement? So, I mean, I think the point is that it's still, it's a We can still offer it as a benefit. It's a benefit, something beneficial for the future, but then this allows us the room to offer what people seem to really want now, which is cash in their hand now, you know, to pay their bills and do what they want to do.
Sure.
If we took a survey of the staff, they're like, we get rid of the healthcare stuff. I just want more money now. And that was what the majority of the staff wanted. And the people that were vested in the current plan were like, fine, we'll leave them go out and we get rid of everything else for everyone else. If that's what staff wanted, that's fine by me.
Okay.
That's cheaper and it allows us to be more competitive in the, the realm in which we compete. But I've heard that younger staff don't care about the benefits. And this allows us to still provide a carrot for those who want a carrot. Take money that we're saving from the benefit that is being utilized very little at this point and try to retain those staff. So maybe they do get year 5 or year 7, wherever the first 25% falls to stay and like, you know what? I do like it here. Yes, staff might get removed for various reasons, right? Outside of their control, and they wanted to stay here. But that happens now. And what do they get when they leave now? And what are we still paying for? The district. So they get nothing. They still are in the same situation. We're still paying more money for that same benefit. But at the end of the day, they have less money now than if they would have stayed for that 5th year. Or if they left, they got nothing. But if they get those statements, maybe like, oh, yeah, I can see this growing now and I can move things around. I can have control over that money and see if I can make it get better through either help through the company or through their own financial people.
I feel like that's a trap then.
Why is it a trap?
Because you're saying you have this benefit. Your benefit is something that I get, but you're really saying that this is a promise if you possibly can make it here. So it's not really a benefit. It's a carrot, sure, but it's not a benefit.
Well, you could argue that about bonuses too. Like when I signed on to my job, it was a bonus. It
Absolutely.
was a
but-
carrot,
but
absolutely.
bonuses are generally a yearly kind of a thing or a 2-yearly thing.
But
It's
some of them
not-
have
it's not
caveats, like
I have
mine
to
is
be
I
here
have to
for
stay a
10
certain amount or
years
they take
to
it
get
back.
that money.
I'm sorry, were you done? I'm like.
Yeah, no, go
I was about to say something. I started-
Listen,
As a person who's fully intended to teach for 30 years in Connecticut, where we don't pay social security, we pay to the teacher's retirement fund. And I left probably 10 grand sitting in Connecticut. I lost that benefit to move here, where I get paid less. I have less rights as a teacher. I have no retirement benefits from where I am, other than my 401k. I can guarantee there are 25-year-old teachers in this district who want to stay here, who want to have retirement benefits, because there won't be social security for our kids our age. I say our age, I'm 40, but like, there isn't going to be social security. Now, I'm coming from a personal angle as well as Mr. Burns, I believe. I don't want to speak for him as an also former teacher, but it is, everything you do is a risk. Everything you do is a risk. And everybody weighs out, am I gonna work for West Dallas and the board could flip and we don't know what happens? Or can I go to Elmbrook and know I have this on the table, but I need to, financially plan along the way? At the end of the day, this has been a ton of work, and coming out and saying that we want to reward teachers. I want to reward teachers. I want to reward the teacher who's been here 3 years and let him or her invest with us as much as possible. If we're firing someone, then they aren't worth that investment, unfortunately. But those people who are here for a short period of time, who want to have families and buy a home, they have a guaranteed retirement come out of healthcare here. For me, that's a tie-in, because I tell everybody when I'm knocking doors lately that this city and the school district is so worth investing in. Every cent we can. And if we can give even a few $1,000s more in salary to our teachers, and that's all we've been focusing on, and also provide an opportunity for healthcare benefits post-retirement, it's almost a no-brainer to me. And the fact that I cried when this was presented to us, because we included EAs, cleaners, secretaries, who are never in the discussion. And they work darn hard for our kids. The backbone of any school, the EAs, the custodians, and the secretaries. Any teacher knows that. So I want to know, I just want some teachers to know that we are fighting for this.
Few things, and I'll try to make them quick. I think to get back to the point about whether or not people care about retirement, they do, but I think there's a difference between looking at a 20-year finish line. And that, you know, that's more intangible than if you are invested and looking at something year to year. It gives it, it makes it a little bit more real. And yeah, maybe in 4 years you leave and you lose that money, but it's money that currently you wouldn't have seen anyway. It just isn't. In terms of vesting, and I know teaching, I know education is different than other occupations. But if you look at other occupations and other companies, they have vesting for their 401ks. It's the same type of thing. You could work at a company for 4 years and you leave, that money's gone. You have to make that decision. You have to weigh that decision. And in those other occupations, you don't have necessarily other pensions or anything else. So I think in the long term, what we're doing here is trying to look out for their future as best as we can. And every situation is going to be a little different, but it's going to help the retirement. It's going to help us save money so that we can reinvest it in our teachers. That is something I have been big on since I took this seat, is that we need to find a way to be competitive for our teachers. We just have to. The fact that most of our teachers are leaving after 4 years, 4 or 5 years, or that graph is so high, says we need to make a greater focus on that area to make sure they're staying, so that we are not having to have to retrain new staff, so that they can build relationships within their schools, within the families that not just have a student now, but are going to have their siblings coming in a few years, and hopefully can have that same teacher and not wonder where that teacher went off to. So I think if this is something that can help contribute to that, it's not perfect. Nothing's going to be perfect. But I think it is a step in the right direction to do what we need to do to continue to make the changes that are going to benefit our staff long term. And to your point, really happy that the other groups have been added to as well. I think that is very important.
And I just want to say that one of the things that when I came into the role at the end of last year when Caitlin left, this was why it was a priority to me. To that exact point, Brian and Brendan, you and I have talked about that too in committee around staff compensation. There are decisions that we can make, and you guys have made them before with facilities and other areas, Anthem, the benefits last year, to try to free up dollars and match benefits to put those dollars back into staff. And this is the best plan that I could come up with to be comparable to what teachers have, to not have the benefit be gutted. I mean, trying to make it comparable, but yet allow us to be able to do things in future budgets to provide them additional benefits. That was really the lens that I was trying to go through to get this. Yeah.
Jane.
So Aaron, we won't be voting on this until sometime in March.
Yep.
So when you go in front of all the employee groups, it's not a done deal. We haven't voted on anything. So what will you be doing? You will be saying this is a possibility? Is that
Yep.
kind of putting the
Yeah.
cart before the horse? And my second point would be, I would love when you get together with those employee groups for you to ask them some of these questions and survey them in some way. Is this something that you want us to pursue?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was some of the intent it was to, one, start with the groups that I mentioned and then get some general feedback from mainly the first couple groups, focus groups, and see who's interested to give us some feedback. And then when we get to more employee group specifics, if we start to hear themes for us to go back to like, hey, we're hearing this a lot. Can we change that? What's that going to do? And then start to try to make that work to go back to that employee group to be like, hey, we can do this and this. But we're trying to make it work for all employees, and some, certain employees represent a group that's, going to be, older or younger. It's like, so we have to try to weigh those out a little bit, if, to Brendan's point, if there's a group of people that are 3-year employees, they go, we like the vest is going to be 5 years. It's like, that's an option. We can talk about that. And we want the dollar amount to be. We have to like weigh into what those questions might be, but I think that's the best approach, next steps. Certainly looking for feedback if you guys have any.
I agree with Jane. I'd like you to kind of bring some of these questions, find out. See what, gauge what that, I'd like also, if you can kind of see what they think about those years, I would like to see. Maybe us bring it down a little bit in terms of where we decide people are vested,
Sure.
but how that's gonna affect us monetarily, that kind of thing, but. I would second that. Just if we can get lots of feedback from the people who are gonna be directly affected by it, and then we can kind of. Well, you guys can take that feedback and then decide like what, if there needs to be anything tweaked or what we need to do.
Sure. Yeah, the committee, we talked about creating, similar to the school consolidation. If you guys can recall, we handed postcards out and QR code. We're thinking, having a QR code on there for, more of a Google form for questions. We can follow back up with
I was
them.
gonna say, is there even something you can put out
there Yeah.
specifically for things where we
Absolutely.
feedback on as
Yeah.
far as like whether it's the amount of years or whatever, so
Yeah.
we can kind of hone in on certain things, not that we
Sure.
get such a variety of feedback
Yeah.
that it's kind of like back to the drawing board altogether,
Yeah.
but narrow it down to certain.
And that's why I think like the proposal in itself, is kind of in this lane, but we certainly have room to deviate if we need to try to make it work for people. And so that's kind of where we're thinking. Certainly we'll have to go back to the executive team to start talking through next steps. What does that look like? How can we gain more feedback? And is it part of the web, things like that. So yeah. Brian, any questions?
Yeah, I guess too, with this piece, if we're looking at other options, and not other options, but asking some of these questions. Is it possible to see, and I'm not saying I endorse this choice, but if we were to gut it, what would that do to the salary schedules? Like if we were just to say like, all right, let's not do this, what would that make our pay scale look like in reflection because of the money then that we would have available to do that?
Yeah. So
Because that would be probably a decision-making point for people, whether or not they're like, oh, this is a good idea or not.
yeah, honestly, I can answer that question right now. So if you said, starting this today, no one gets anything. You work today, you get nothing. You'd have about $3.5 million at the end of the year to commit. For every, every percent is about $500,000. So people would get a 7%, roughly a 7% increase. That works out. Is that my math, right? Yeah.
And if we were to do that, would we still be able to have HRAs available that if staff wanted to donate into them?
Well, certainly, yeah. We have consultants we work with that people can opt into using dollars that they receive in salary to 403Bs and things like that. We can certainly set that up.
So I think that's another piece that as you're presenting it, that might be something that gives them information as to whether or not they want to continue with this pathway or if they want to go a different pathway.
Yeah.
Saying that this would probably be across the board a 7% increase in salary.
Yeah, I do get a little nervous asking that question, not because of complete transparency. It's just that some people have a benefit that is going to give them $100,000 of health insurance benefit. And if they got 5 years left, a 7% increase, they're going to laugh.
I know, but that's not our biggest group right now, and that's not what we're looking to try and keep.
But
I
it's
mean,
just something
we
to
are,
consider.
but,
You'd
like-
be taking something away for people that spent 20+ years here.
I understand. It's just, it's out there and it's, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Because even at 20 years now, no one gets anything anyways. So with what we have now.
I think
So-
that would be interesting, but my fear is that we make a decision based off of a certain group of employees at one snapshot in time. And then, so yeah, right now we have a lot of people who are in that 0 to 5 or whatever range. And to some of the previous points before, they don't worry about retirement quite as much. So you might totally be taking a benefit off the board that could end up being in 1-2 years more attractive to people. And then we're back to the drawing board, so to speak. That worries me. I feel like working in the HR industry, we're kind of underselling the value of a good retirement plan. I think I think there's still a little bit more value there than some people want to admit to and think about. So I think it'd be good data for sure, but I'd just be worried about making a decision based off of that piece of data. If that makes sense.
And I know some of the districts who previously had taken that benefit away post Act 10. I think some of it was reactive to budgets. What are we going to do? Right. A lot of those districts have gone back to the table to try to establish things like that. one of them is local to us.
Yeah.
So, I think that's a worth a conversation, Brent. I agree, but there'd be a fine line. And if you start drawing the line, then it's like those dollars that we're talking about aren't real until those groups are gone.
Right, no, and
You know what I mean?
And I get that,
Yeah.
but, and I guess what I'm advocating for is not like getting rid of this and having the HRA. I was someone who at 22 was putting $200 a month into a retirement fund that's separate from work. So
Absolutely.
like, that's something that I did, but what I would advocate for is that if it's a benefit, it's a benefit and they get it when they work.
Mhm.
So they get a year, they get their $2,000, they work 2 years, they get their $4,000, like they get that value.
Mhm.
That would be my argument.
Other questions? Can't see him.
See there? Is he
Forgot about
sleeping?
Marty.
You know, Marty, hello.
Marty, do you have anything to add? Anything you want to say?
Can you hear me?
Can't hear you yet.
Okay. Am I there?
I think we can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm on. All right, thanks. No, going in, we knew this was going to be a challenging set of questions, conversations. It's a big change if the board goes down this road. What's in the strategic plan is to really research sustainable post-employment benefits, right? What we do now is not sustainable, right? So if we're in the 90+ percentile for what we commit in every budget cycle to retiree healthcare, that's why it's in the strategic plan. That's why the board wanted it in the strategic plan, because what we're doing now is not a solution. So finding the right solution, I think, is the delicate piece of it. I think some of the takeaways tonight are as we go into focus groups and maybe even a broader survey, but that would take a lot of educating, right? It's part of the challenge of doing a broad survey of asking every single teacher, what do you think about this? Well, we just spent almost 2 hours on it. And we're just scratching the surface of understanding. So it's really hard to work through that, but through focus groups, and that's why the idea of focus groups, where we can do some educating and then drill into this. One of the big questions: would you rather have this in salary or have a post-employment benefit? I think is one of the fundamental questions to try to tease out. But this is the beginning point, and I think that's why. Aaron did a nice job. We did a nice job, Aaron, starting out saying, okay, here's where this goes in terms of initial step, pause, get a bunch of feedback, come back to the table again. As we work through it, and Ken said, yeah, the process in Shorewood was interesting because all of these are as you work through these kind of changes. And I think getting a pulse of where employees are related to it. But I think right now, the risk is really on the burden of the budget in the current plan. That's why it's not sustainable, because all the risk is on the budget. This kind of plan engages employees in managing the risk. Any investment like that has some risk to it. But Aaron mentioned it earlier. This is about giving employees opportunities and choice. It's not about being predatory. It's about actually opening the opportunities. And there can't be limitless, because then we're not sustainable again. But it does introduce far more opportunity for employees to engage with us around their employment, right, through the benefits. So I think those are the things that I think we've got to figure out. How much engagement do they really want? And is it the benefit of value or the salary? So those are the next steps to come. But again, I appreciate the board taking on the hard conversation, because this is not an easy or fun part of the work. But long term, the things we've been doing create fiscal stability for us. And this is one more of those steps. So appreciate all of the time tonight.
So I agree. I think this is a good first step. This is a long time coming. I asked for this the first year I was on the board, because it was told to me that this is something that we need to look at, and it's taken 6 years for us to get to this point. So I'm happy to see us even talking about this right now in real numbers. Like for the longest time, we had no idea how much it even cost because you have to fund two systems. You know, yes, it's the 4.8 to start if we went with everything as it is right now. But we're still paying for the retiree benefits for the other people that are still doing it, right? So we're double paying. We will until, that's why the whole buying people out thing and trying to get one plan in place, the sooner the better.
Right.
Is what's gonna really put the district in good financial position, long-term financial position moving forward. And that's really what it is. It's not gonna be, you know, even when my kids are still in school, that this will actually become like a really good thing for the district. But this board and the boards I've been on have taken on these hard questions throughout because of the issues that we've had in the past and understanding that the financial climate that we are in is never a given. We don't know. Every 2 years is a big question mark. How's funding going to be? Are we going to get more? Are we not going to get more? And I like these sorts of things because it's planning ahead. It's going to put us, the district, in a position that will make us more nimble, to be able to make decisions as things come around. We have the facilities, you know, things still coming down the pipe, which is the other piece of that. But you know, this is a big thing, which is annual, which is all the time. And I've been told ever since I've been here, is not something that draws people to come to our district to stay. And so to me, it's a no-brainer to change that, to either make it something that people come to the district to stay, or makes it a financial benefit for the district. For those who do stay, they get, and those who don't, okay, fine. Then we're not basically paying for that throughout the rest of the time and having that big chunk of the budget we don't have access to because of those commitments. So I'll be interested to see the outcomes from the focus groups and the meetings that are coming next. I'm excited about the timeline. I hope that we're able to stick with that, to be able to get to a workshop by mid-March, so that we can kind of hear what those feedbacks are and move forward with it. Any other comments or questions about this? I want to thank you for the time and effort to do this, both of you. And I'm sure there's more than just you, Aaron, that worked on this. So the entire team, this is definitely heavy stuff. It's complex. And anyone who's watching this, staff or community, you know, I hope that you will take the time to learn to understand everything that goes into it. It sounds like you're taking something away, but when you look at it from this perspective, for a lot of people, even at the current rate of 10, you know, sitting at 10 years, you'd still get something if you left the district after 10 years versus now, where you wouldn't get anything. So I think that already is a plus, is a positive compared to what we have currently. And the fact that it could save the district funds that we could put into salary, increasing amount of staff that we have, so we can reduce class sizes. I mean, there's a lot of things that we could put those funds into to try and, help our students, help our staff, reduce burnout, increase our students' achievement. I think are all very good things. And there's many, even facilities. I mean, there's lots of things that we could spend that money on. So
we're gonna send out a communication short, but before the end of the week to all staff to kind of get a summary of kind of what was talked about here tonight. Link to the presentation, link to the video for the presentation for this meeting. So that way, if someone really wants to really dive in and it's really important to them, they can watch the whole thing, because as Marty said, it took 2 hours for us to talk this through. It's not a one pager with a presentation without any context. It's very difficult. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
so that'll go out. We're going to work on that. We're close, but I think we want to make sure it's ready to go, and that'll go out later this week.
do you need, you said, direction is part of this. And so, from what we heard here today, thumbs up, thumbs down, if we're proceeding to the next steps and talking with staff is something that we're looking at doing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Well, thank you for that.
anything
Appreciate
else?
that.
Any
That
parting
was it.
comments?
No, thank you for the time tonight. I appreciate it. I know this is, as Marty said, a lot of stuff, and we just feel like it's important and want to get moving. So we appreciate your time tonight. Hopefully the Packers are winning. I haven't checked. So.
Yeah.
10-6. Okay. All right. Well,
All right,
Oh,
so
yeah.
then you have your next 60 slide presentation is up next.
we will tone it down for the next one. That was as bad as it gets.
All right, so with
Second.
moved and seconded, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Merry
everyone.
Christmas, everybody.
Happy Merry Christmas.